With that, I'll call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, June the 12th. Are there any additions, changes to the agenda? In which case, I'll move the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We have several delegations this afternoon, and the first will be from Calgary Region Airshed Zone. Ms. Bloor.
Hello, thank you. Tanya's just going to pull it up. Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you for giving us this time. We're just here to give you a brief update on CRAS. Tanya is our engagement program manager, and she'll do a little bit too, and we know we have our time. So I'm not going to go through every slide you have. If you have questions after, that's fine, and if we leave and you have more, Lori has our email. So CRAS has been around since 2007. We have 1.5 million people in our region, and we have 34% of the population of the province. Sorry. We have a variety of industry in the region, as well as you all know out here, tourism is big. Number 1 and 2 sources of emission in our region. Number 1 is transportation. That's all transportation. We can break it down, but all transportation is our number 1 source of emissions. And our second is home and commercial heating. Industry sources are after that. So we have a different combination out here in the CRAS region and how to deal with it. This is some of the commitment that we offer our members. One of the big things is, with your membership, we really encourage the members to get involved in the committees. That's where the work gets done. That's where you really get your value for your membership. So the CRAS Policy Committee took the recent climate leadership plan from the province and looked at what the work we're doing, and it aligns. We are doing the work on behalf of the government so they can meet their climate leadership plan, which isn't something that we normally look at and associate with air. They don't even associate air quality and climate change, but you need to. So we're doing that on the government's behalf. Some of the good stuff that we're doing and changes is our monitoring. So we have 3 monitoring stations in the city of Calgary, and they produce what is called the AQHI, the Air Quality Health Index. We recognize that that is for the city of Calgary. However, it can be used outside of it, but it lacks because it's not close to this region or way down south. There's another station in Airdrie that produces the AQHI as well. This year, we will be outfitting our PAMO, and that's the truck at the bottom of the picture. And it will be going to 4 areas within our region that were identified through our network assessment. And while it's in those areas for 6 months at a time, over a 4-year period, so it'll come back for another 6 months within that 4 years, so we can get all the seasonal variables, it will be able to produce an AQHI. And the Canmore, Banff, Bow Valley, we're calling it that whole area, the corridor area, will have the mammal, as I said, twice throughout those 4 years. And while it's here, the AQHI will be available off our website, and we'll be doing engagement and education while it's out here. This is a new program, and we really think it's important because it's continuous data. So the program starts in September, and I can't give you the exact date right off the top of my head. I'm sorry this week as to when it's slated in the schedule to come out here, but I can get that to Lori when we're doing the 2 times. So what'll happen is the 6 months before it comes, we'll be siting. So what we need is a place where it's not right next to a source. It needs to have power. There's some criteria that we need to have. And Mandeep Dhaliwal, who's our air quality program manager, he'll be making sure that we site properly, and we'll be doing it with our joint reps from all our municipalities out here. The other thing I want to mention about monitoring is Clean Air Strategic Alliance, or CASA, is going to be doing their Rover 3 project again. As you can tell from Rover 3, they've done that project twice before. And they were out in this area and they monitor transportation. And they're coming back again in the next year. Where exactly, I don't know, but they'll go back to the same spot they were the first time. And that was before I was involved with CREST, so I don't have the exact location today. But that'll be another component of monitoring that we're going to be able to access the data from as well, and we'll share it with all of our members. One of the big things is CRAS developed the Particulate Matter and Ozone Management Plan in 2008. We reviewed it and updated it in 2014, and we're now doing another achievement report on it. So this fall we will have gone through the plan. We'll identify tasks that we've achieved, tasks that maybe aren't relevant anymore for various reasons, and the reasons will be given, but we'll do it and we'll bring all our stakeholders together to share the findings of that report. One of the changes that will be coming down is there'll be new Canadian ambient air quality standards for NOx. And that will affect this region as well, because currently we know the level that they're going to be bringing in, we will already be at the management trigger. So we'll have to do something as a region. So same as we did for particulate matter and ozone, we'll have to get everybody together and figure out how are we going to do, what can we do to ensure that NOx stays low too. The Air Quality Health Index, as I mentioned, so we always say lower the number, lower the risk. This is a really important number to know, especially if you have respiratory issues or if you have young children or really old individuals. It's a free app off the Government of Alberta website. I encourage everybody to download it and to use it, especially out here in the mountains. Again, I recognize that the number comes from Calgary, but it has to pass through this region before it gets to Calgary. So it does give you a guideline that you can use. The next is the section that Tanya's going to talk about.
Hi, so we've been doing a lot of engagement in our communities and in Calgary and the surrounding communities. We've been implementing idle-free programs. We've been doing workshops. So our first workshop was held in High River, and we did on dust suppression. Oh, sorry. This is out of, yes, in High River we did the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan and Compliance. And in Vulcan County in October we did a dust suppression on gravel roads workshop. And our next workshop is being held in Wheatland County on June 27th, and it's on transportation. It's up on our website. I have sent the presentation or the invitation to Lori, and council members, everybody, the public are all welcome to attend this workshop. And we would love to do more workshops. So if there's anything that council would like to see, or if Lori would like to see, just get in contact with us and we will grab some speakers and come out and do that. It's really good, and the numbers are starting to grow on those workshops. We have school curriculum kits for grade 5 and 6. We fit into their weather curriculum, and we have created with Inside Education. Inside Education is a group that goes into schools and teaches science programs for kids for free. So they didn't know anything about air quality, so they came. They said usually we work around water. So they came and we helped create a Clean Air Responsible Schools program called CARS. And we will come out and do those programs. And as a thank you, we give them the idle zone-free signs for their schools, and the kids get really excited. Last year, we developed a wildfire protocol guide with the City of Calgary and AHS, and it's a guide for everybody to use, but what it does is it takes that AQHI number and it puts it into a chart over what number it is, how long should your employees be outside, how long should your kids be outside for recess. Again, that's on our website, and if you have any questions about that, please let me know. And here's just some pictures of our workshops and our idle zone free sign, and if you would like a sign, we can always bring you one too, but I see them around Canmore all over. So.
We have a few, but we can always use more, I'm sure.
Okay, perfect, perfect.
Save the taxpayer.
Yeah, great.
So we have a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. I was trying to remember when you mentioned your mobile monitoring station was out here, and I'm thinking it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
It was during the Winter Games that you hosted.
Oh, right.
So that was 2014? 14 that it was out here,
And then you haven't had a monitoring station here since that time?
No, we haven't. We had passives, but Passive monitoring is not, it's limited in what you can use it for. It's an average over a month, it's one number. You need a trend. So we did passive monitoring for about 7 years. So we have a trend from that. Continuous is better because you're getting the breakdown of it by minute. Mm-hmm. So that data will be available on our website when it's deployed as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be interesting to see what you find in the way of changes when you're out here again next. And you said it would be twice a year?
It'll be 6 months, and then it'll come back within that 4-year period for another 6 months. So the 6 month deployments are October till April, and then May to September. So it'll come twice within that 4-year period to get the seasonal variabilities as well.
I see.
Yeah.
And when you're in the Bow Valley, I'm sure you do monitor air quality in and around the Exshaw region from the plants?
Well, the Exshaw plant has their own monitors, and I understand that they share that data with their community. One thing that the government is doing is all industries are going to have to start submitting their data electronically to the data warehouse. So that'll be better because it'll be more readily available. After the 30 days they submit it, but it'll be available. So we don't have it, say, on hand minute by minute, but we work closely, and Lafarge and Greymont are both members of CRAS and have been since the beginning. So yeah.
Great. And you also mentioned that you noted how the work you're doing fits in nicely with the Climate Leadership Plan. Are there any new programs or new initiatives you've started since that Climate Leadership Plan was initiated?
Not at this time. What our first step was is to examine the leadership plan. The policy committee went through it and identified the areas in it, and I can share the document that they prepared for the board with Lori. I'll email it to her this week. And so they took what all the committees were doing and highlighted, oh, this is what we're doing in this committee with this. Our next step then is to look at where in that area of the plan we might do more work. However, as you recognize, resources, financial and human, are limited, and so we just have to be cautious of how much work we pile on our volunteers on our committees.
Absolutely.
We have done one step. We worked with PR students in Mount Royal, and we developed a program, and it's One Action for Change. So we are just creating funding right now for that, but they created a brand new website based on that One Action for Change and printable material, so we'll be able to share that. Yeah.
Are there questions from other councillors? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, ladies. I was just thinking about the app that you had, which was great. I didn't realize it was an application, and the fires that we experienced last summer. So the smoke that we would have had here in the valley, it would have been measured from the Calgary station. So that makes, I'm wondering if anecdotally you knew that if the smoke was thicker in Canmore or in the Bow Valley than it was in the city.
I don't know if we could say thicker. I think Mandeep would say that he probably could figure out the concentration of certain elements in the air, particulate matter being the worst. And, you know, a layman, I am not a scientist, but from my layman point of view of 10 years working with CREST, I would say that yes, probably there was more particulate matter in your air here than what we saw in Calgary, and we saw huge numbers in Calgary. We had an exceedance constantly over the whole period. So, you know, the air quality health index was at, you know, 9 and 10 all the time.
It's funny because smoke is a funny beast. I spent time on Kootenay Lake, and there was literally a fire a kilometer across the lake from us, but we weren't getting much, if any, smoke at all. It was happening on the next valley over where they were getting hammered.
And the winds really do
of course.
help or hurt.
And rain is always
lovely, and how it goes, yes,
bit.
definitely.
Excellent, that's good information. Thank you very much.
And we just have a little, Tanya's just going to bring around a little gift from us to say thank you for your time.
Oh, well, gifts. We always like gifts up here. I don't know if the library board's paying attention, but thank you so much. Oh, I got a choice.
Choice of color,
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thanks very much for being here to bring an update. you know, we're always aware that CRAS is out there doing the work, and I see a lot of information online that you share, but it's good to have you in the council chambers from time to time to just present. Perfect.
It's a nice way to spend your day at work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't know if the next delegation is bearing gifts or not, but but the public library, Michelle.
Mayor Burrowman, members of council, it's nice to see a full house this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Michelle Preston, Library Director, and we've got a bit of a full house ourselves. Joining me today, Beth Millard, Chair of the Library Board, Ann Medikosh, one of our board members and member of the Advocacy Committee, Tegan Madge, our Children's Librarian, Linda Lister, Chair of the Marigold Library Board, Rose Reed, the Indigenous Outreach Specialist from Marigold Library System, and Michelle Toombs, CEO of the Marigold Library System. Our library is a vibrant municipal service, and we are reaching out to the community in a variety of ways. We had particular success with a number of initiatives this past year, and we're going to highlight those for you today. In April, we reached a milestone, 5 years in our Elevation Place location. To celebrate, we offered free memberships throughout the month. We also handed out free membership coupons, like the one on the screen, so that anyone renewing later in the year could take advantage of the promotion. Removing the library fee proved to be quite popular. Compared to our membership stats from April the previous year, our new memberships increased 63%, and our renewals increased 53%. In addition to this promotion, we marked the occasion with a front entrance display showcasing our library's timeline from 1972 to the present. As part of the display, we gathered various statistics to show how our use of the library has grown, not only from its inception, but since moving to Elevation Place. The top graph indicates town population, and the lower line is library memberships. So as town population has increased, so too has library usage. During that same time, in the bottom graph, the items in our collection as well as our circulation have also increased during that time. In 2013, 5 years ago, since then we've noticed marked increases in use of the library facility. The number of visitors has increased by 34%, and program participants has gone up by 8%. To address public feedback and meet increased public demand for our services, we expanded our operating hours and we have increased the staff. In addition to our 5-year milestone, we had success with the Affordable Services Program. The library was one of the first partners to join this town initiative in 2017. Since the program launched in March last year, we've issued 191 free memberships to participants. As with our free anniversary initiative, this has been another way for us to provide barrier-free access to members of the community. In 2016, we had very few in-house French language programs, and what we offered was poorly attended. So as part of our plan of service and strategic plan, enhancing library service to the Francophone community was one of our goals last year. As part of this process, we partnered with ACFA, the French-Canadian Association of Alberta, and with their support, we were able to purchase a number of items for the French language collection in the children's area. We offered 2 early literacy programs in French, and we ran 2 seasonal French programs for school-age children, a Halloween program, a couple of the children doing the crafts up there, as well as a Christmas program, a story time with Mrs. Santa Claus, who is also in the picture there. We were able to raise awareness of the library through our listing in the Fall 27 ACFA program guide, so we got a lot more interest and participation in our programming overall. In addition to our collaboration with ACFA, in March of last year, we also ran a well-received French reading program. We had 76 students in French immersion and the Francophone School who participated. Due to the positive feedback that we received, we ran that program again this year, and we had a small increase in the number of participants. Working with the local Francophone School, we also initiated a monthly outreach program with the Notre Dame de Mont to provide a story time to the preschool, kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2 classes. We accomplished a lot with our new partnerships and outreach efforts, and we found greater engagement and participation from the Francophone community, a definite success in our book. September 18th to the 24th marked a week-long celebration of science in Canada known as Science Literacy Week. Canmore Library partnered with the Biosphere Institute to launch this event in Canmore. We increased awareness and engagement in local, provincial, and national science organizations. We encouraged children and adults to develop and expand their literacy skills, nurture their enjoyment of reading and science, and we provided a forum for local science writers to connect with each other and with the community. 16 off-site and in-house programs were offered during the week for adults, families, and children. Programs range from make your own science book, making with magnets, Wriggly Worms, which was a worm composter, a science-themed movie night, a science writers gathering, and a crime lab. The library directly accommodated upwards of 300 patrons at these various programs. Most were drop-in and all were free to the community. Jesse Hildebrand, founder of Canada's National Science Literacy Week, commented how impressed he was with the planning and execution of Canmore's Science Literacy Week, that the activities offered were some of the best he had seen, and that other libraries were contacting him to get more information about Canmore's events. It was very successful, and we endeavor to make it an annual event for the community, celebrating scientific diversity that the Bow Valley has to offer. The national website explains a little bit more about that event. So if you go to scienceliteracy.ca, you can see a description of all that we did last year. People living in Morley are often unable to get to town, let alone to a library. This is particularly true for youth. So working in tandem with Rose Reed, the Indigenous outreach specialist from Marigold, we started taking steps of bringing the library to them. One of the Indigenous outreach initiatives we participated in was the Summer Fun Program. Tegan Madge, our children's librarian, attended 5 sessions and soon had the children playing games, sharing stories, and discussing books. 2 activities that were particularly popular were button making and giant-sized games. Giant games of pick-up sticks were held almost every day, and when the button maker was brought out, Tegan found herself cranking out buttons for everyone in the building. Children, adult, and many of the elders wanted one. We've noted that for next year, so we'll bring those as gifts for council. This summer program was wonderful for the youth who took part, not only for the fun and socialization, but also to keep up the habit of reading over the summer holidays and start back to school with greater success. Tegan and Rose also attended several flea markets sponsored by the Weabi Society. One of the most popular activities by far was a green screen photo booth. The lady being chased by dinosaurs is an example of one of the photos that was taken. Once the photo booth was set up, they were run off their feet, and the novelty of receiving a photograph and the endless possibilities and backgrounds made for a very engaging afternoon. This kind of activity is key in bridging the gap between our communities and sharing something that is both fun and meaningful, as these pictures often are. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I had 1 or 2 questions, and there's likely others. The Francophone program, which sounds great. So at this time, what sort of percentage of lending material does the library have that is in French?
That's a really good question. We can find that one out because we've been building on it constantly. Right. It's always changing. It's definitely smaller than our English component, but it's something, because we have a very active Francophone community, we're trying to build that up. Yeah, I know at times of the year, the Francophone community in the Bow Valley in the past has reached as much as 20% of the residents, so yeah. And on the outreach to the Morley students, which another great program, fabulous you're doing that. Is part of the program encouraging the students to
learn to enjoy reading and use books, or?
Whenever the summer reading game, essentially, that's a large component of it. We do try to make it a fun activity, though. It's not a lot like school, but by encouraging reading and literacy in different ways, it certainly helps them when they do go back to school in the fall.
Great. Yeah, 2 great programs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I just wondered, you still hold the used book sales? It's a great thing. So it's just for my interest because we're trying to clean house a little bit. We have a lot of books. But can a person drop those off anytime at the library, or is it okay? And do you use that, is that a revenue stream for you? I think I saw it on the, when you do your financial presentation.
We have 3 used book sales a year, and they're all coordinated and run by our Friends of the Library group. It's really appreciated all that they do. We take donations year-round at the library, and the proceeds from those sales do come back to the library in the form of a donation, and we put that back into programming, collection, and other needs that enhance our budget. And it's just a great thing. We also use a lot of the materials for our outreach initiatives, giving away books at the Folk Festival, at the Mountain Market, etc. So Books on the Bus program. So there's a number of ways that we can use those materials.
Great. It's good to see the outreach into the community. It really is.
Thank you.
And another question I have is about fees. So I know some provinces don't, library membership is free. Not the case in Alberta, but is the case in some municipalities. Can you tell me a little bit about that, why that's the case?
Perhaps the other Michelle could speak a little bit more to that. Our community is one of the few remaining in Alberta that actually still charges memberships. Banff is free, Exshaw is free, and it is a bit of a barrier for some people in terms of the cost of that. Most libraries in other parts of Canada do not charge as well, so when people come to Alberta, they often are surprised when they do encounter a fee. But Michelle, did you have anything further to add?
Thanks for asking. Alberta is the only province in North America that has in their Libraries Act a clause that allows for charging for the registration of library cards, not for the use of the library itself or the cards, but for the registration process. I think there are a few libraries in Quebec as well. Because of a movement that's been happening in Alberta for the last 5 years, 70% of Albertans can access library cards without having to pay that registration fee. It's a movement, and it's also totally up to the library board to make that decision, how that's handled.
Okay.
Does that help?
Thanks.
Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question somewhat along the lines of Mayor Borrowman regarding your French resources. So you have films and books, audio tapes, that sort of thing in French in the Canmore Library? Yeah. And do you get support through the Marigold system with Francophone resources as well?
Absolutely, and anyone with a library card can search and borrow through interlibrary loan, so anything we don't have in-house can be brought in as well.
And is there a substantial amount of Francophone material available, or is it a small percentage?
It's definitely not as big as English. It is, again, it's growing, but it's not just French. There's a lot of other multilingual materials in the catalog as well. When we get requests, we do pass along that feedback to Marigold. So if there's particular areas like French language or AV materials that we notice gaps, then they will help us to address those as well.
Okay. I had a question about your Aboriginal or your First Nations programming. Have you presented to the band councils, or do you get any kind of support from the band councils for any of that programming?
I would actually ask Rose if she has any feedback on that. She is the Outreach Indigenous Services Specialist from Marigold. She's done a lot of the initial work with that, and we have partnered with her. So in terms of us specifically, we haven't gone out and done those one-on-one interactions at that level yet. But Rose, did you?
Sure. Do you need to go up there? Yeah, please come up to the microphone. No, we need to hear you, so that'd be great to hear it. Yeah.
There's thousands of people watching this at home.
Oh, no, I'm going to be tongue-tied.
Don't be nervous.
Oh, as if I was ever tongue-tied. In fact, we have not made an official presentation to the Band Council yet. That's on our agenda to try to work out this year. But we've had incredible support from the managers at every other level out there. We've got partnerships with Chiniki College and Eden Valley School and the high school and the daycares and many other organizations as well. So, but in fact, the band gets their money federally, libraries are funded provincially, so the monies don't ever cross tracks in that sense.
And so your position with Marigold as the
I'm the Indigenous Outreach Specialist.
And so do you actually have discretionary funds to provide to these sorts of outreach programs? Through your
There's a portion of money that's given from the government to provide library service, not just in Morley, but also on Siksika, and those monies are dispersed through Marigold.
Okay, but these programs that are being provided through the Canmore Library are not being funded through that process, is that correct?
No, the things that take place out in Morley are funded through Marigold, and Canmore offers support in terms of manpower, though, for sure.
Okay, so it is a partnership between Marigold and
yes,
and the Canmore Library. Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for your presentation and all the good work the Canmore Library does in our community. One of the questions I had involved the Science Literacy Week. Just wondering, it sounds like you had very good success there. Wondering if you do some mentorship and encourage them to also participate in the school science programs that we have every year.
I know that Melanie Watt from the Biosphere was working a lot with the schools as part of that, and we did get a lot of feedback in terms of how the schools could be involved with that program, and I'm sure they're going to incorporate that into this year. There was a little bit of work with the schools last year as well, and we can only grow from there.
Yeah, they have a great science fair every year, so it's good to have those connections. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Preston. So my question, I'm going to beat the Francophone horse because everybody else seems to be asking questions. When do you hold your French reading program in the calendar year?
Most of our programming takes place during the school year.
Okay, so it's not just a part of the year, it's through the whole year.
Correct. And in the summer, with our summer reading game, our regular one, people can read in French as well. It's not restricted to English, so we offer something at some point during the course of the year.
Great. And then just out of curiosity, I noticed that when you showed us the graph about use and membership, et cetera, there seemed to be like a trajectory point right after the Olympics. And I was wondering if that happened to Mary around the same time that we joined the Marigold system.
That's a really interesting question. I've never sort of investigated that specifically.
A weird, curious mind, I'm sorry.
Canmore joined Marigold in 1987, so we've had a relationship for over 30 years.
Okay, great. So,
but I think a lot of things have happened lately because there have been a lot of changes in our service profile and the relationship that we have with Canmore Library.
Great, thanks. And as a child that's in immersion that uses the French books quite a bit, and all the books, quite frankly, in your library, I am very happy to see that the circulation of French books have increased because it's made it more helpful for her as she's trying to get better at the en français part of her education. So thank you very much.
Very glad that you're finding it useful. Thank you.
I don't think there's any other questions for now, so thanks for being here and giving us an update on what's going on at the library. Sounds like a lot.
A lot is happening, and I'm now happy to pass on the rest of the presentation to Michelle Toombs. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ms. Toombs, welcome to Canmore Council.
Can I have 2 minutes to add something to the questions that you asked? Number one, the French materials. Canmore's a member of Marigold. Marigold's a member of TRAC. There are 4 regions. We cover 73% of the province. There are a lot of French communities in the Peace area, and we are part of that, and we share seamlessly with 180 libraries, many of which have excellent French resources. So it's a great advantage to us. The other thing about the Indigenous funding that I wanted to say is that the province, starting in 2016, provided us with $10.25 per resident of both the Siksika and Stoney Nakoda nations. So we receive a grant of $93,000. And we, among other things, in addition to paying Rose's salary, we also provide grants which our libraries can apply for, and it can assist with those kinds of activities that take them out to the nations.
Thank you.
Now, may I start my
Yes,
presentation, please? My name is Michelle Toombs, and I wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I think it's particularly wonderful that we can do this with Canmore Library, because we do a lot of things together. And I also wanted to acknowledge that Linda Lister, the chair of the Marigold Library System, is here today. She's been the chair for quite a few years, 10 years, I think. And not only does she lead the 4 board meetings that we have, which have 44 board members, she also is on 9 committees. So she does a lot for our system. Yeah. So what is Marigold Library System? This is my first presentation, so I'm going to maybe start with some basics, and that is that Marigold was started by provincial in 1981. It was the first of 7 regional library systems that were devoted just to public library services. And we're the yellow band on the map. We provide affordable, state-of-the-art public library services and support by pooling the resources that we get through levies from our municipalities and also provincial grants. 61% of our revenue comes from municipal levies, and 36% rather comes from provincial grant money. We're not a public library, and we do not duplicate the services, but we support and enhance, I think, the opportunities for libraries like Canmore to provide really meaningful services that they can interact with in their communities. There are some exceptions to that. Marigold does provide direct services, we call it, in a number of ways. One is through a mail service. If individuals are homebound or if they live a far distance from libraries, they can go through Marigold to provide mail service. Also, we provide online services. So an individual can get a library card and they don't have to step foot into a library. They can access quite a few library sources with our digital resources. We have 6 platforms for ebooks as well. As mentioned, the town of Canmore joined in 1987. And so just to give you an idea of the range of services that we have, Marigold supports 44 municipalities, 320,000 residents, 37 member library boards, 36 libraries, 12 book deposits, and 2 locations with remote lockers between Saskatchewan and BC border. And lately, also Siksika and Stoney. So, Canmore Library is really busy and well used, and I'm not going to focus on this because Michelle has already told you a bit about that. But I would like to say that 7,724 card holders counted with Canmore addresses since we counted that on June 1st. That's a really high number. I think your community is doing well. Your library is doing a fabulous job of enticing people to have cards and to use your library system. Also, in terms of the number of e-books relative to the number of actual physical books, it's running about between 8 and 10% in most libraries. So yes, e-book use is going up, but it's not even close to taking over the physical materials that are borrowed throughout our system. So, library service, as you can imagine, has changed a lot in the last few years, particularly when we got library computers. Before that, library systems were mainly in the business of buying books, cataloging them, making them available. And now, our business has really focused on library support of computers. Computers, networks, purchasing computers, installing computers, licensing computers, and all of that. In 2009, when I first started, we didn't have van deliveries everywhere. We didn't have digital collections. We only had 3 servers, and now we have 26 and growing every day, it seems. Question we hear a lot is, are libraries still relevant? So a quote from the Globe and Mail from an article in May 2018, libraries are not static repositories of physical books, rather they are knowledge hubs where people of all ages can seek out opportunities, collaborate, create, and learn.
And what we found in recent days is the physical library, the bricks and mortar library, is still a very important place. It's a people place. It's where people come to get together, they talk, they interact, they meet each other, they share ideas, and of course they support the activities and the programs that are going on in that library. And it's reflective of the community. Things that happen in one community aren't necessarily the same as another community, because it depends totally on what the needs are. We all have our plan of services, including Marigold, and so we have our priorities mapped out for us. But a couple things I would say about libraries: they eliminate barriers to technology and connectivity. They contribute to health and welfare among residents, and we don't always get the credit for that, but certainly our doctors and nurses are referring people to the library. Libraries contribute to safety in the community. We're engaging people, we're keeping them occupied, they have important things to do in the library, and there are two niches that libraries really fill that are hard to duplicate in other services. One is preschool literacy and school preparedness, and the other niche is lifelong learning. So how does Canmore benefit? And this is really important because you're paying a levy, a significant levy of $85,000 almost to support Marigold services. And then there's more money that's coming from the Canmore Library Board as well. And in your package, there's a value of your investment report. And I think you might have seen that in your package already. And what we do on a yearly basis is provide this report to our municipalities, especially the ones with libraries where we can track those expenditures. And I'm just going to quickly mention some things about that, and I'll try to be quicker about this. First of all, together with the library's levies of your municipality and the library board, Marigold received $136,000, and in return we gave back services that we counted worth $232,000. There's a big difference in that. How did we do that? Well, it's because we pool our revenue from all our municipalities, including municipalities like counties and MDs. We also get provincial grants. And what we do is we count the things we can count, like every book that's purchased, we count that. And every piece of equipment that we purchase, we count that. But when it's a service like a digital collection that's kind of one cost and it's shared, we divide that equally among our municipalities. And the third thing the board has determined is we charge a set amount for any consulting and IT specialty work that we do. And usually that hourly amount includes travel time and more than one individual. So as you look through this value of your investment report, which is quite detailed, it's a really good overview of the kind of services that we provide and the things that Canmore Public Library doesn't have to worry about so much. They can get to the business of actually providing library service to your residents. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the Schedule C. The package has been received, I understand, by your administration, and it is something that we provide every couple of years. The board determines what the levy rates will be for a set number of years. I would say that the Schedule C, which is due for signing by the end of September, it will go into effect, according to the Marigold Agreement, when 60% of our municipalities have signed Schedule C and representing 60% of our population. So when we've been successful in the last couple of Schedule C appeals, the Schedule C is actually the last page of our Marigold Agreement. Now, just to give you a kind of an overview of what's happening at Marigold, first of all, provincial library funding is stable. That's really good news that we received from Municipal Affairs. Because several provinces have had their library funding kind of in jeopardy. It's been taken away and then given back, but Alberta is a strong supporter of library services in Alberta. And although we were using 2016 population, which is not ideal for places with Canmore's population growth of 7%, it's certainly a good indication that we do have strong support behind us. The other thing is about our new headquarters building. Marigold is currently in a building that was built in 1953. It was an armory. We have a firing range in the basement. That's our claim to fame. We've outgrown it. Our population has tripled in the last couple of decades with the growth around Calgary in particular. And we're going towards building a new building. And that is in collaboration with the Western Irrigation District, who has a lot more in common with us than one would think. So we're building a building together with a common space in the middle. I'm here to tell you that we have saved a lot of money, and we also received a $3 million infrastructure grant, which has helped us a lot towards getting that building built in 2 years. You might want to hear that I'm not here to ask for any money from council. That might be a bonus point. Anyway, that is my presentation. And Rose is here, of course, to talk about the work that she's doing in Stony Nakota, and it's a wonderful job that she's doing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Toombs. That's great to have that update. I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about the levy. And I think you have it really clearly laid out here in that there's a levy to the municipality, but then there's also a levy to the library board. But the levy to the library board essentially flows through the municipal budget. Is that correct? To the library?
Not always, although we tend to think of it as money coming from the municipality, which is a combination of what comes from your town and also what comes from the library board. Actually, a lot of the levy board payments that come directly from the library board takes revenue from the provincial grants and from the fundraising that they do, so it's a combination of revenue that they get. So we tend to think of the municipal levy and the library board levy as together as one unit. And on that chart, you didn't actually ask this question, but can I just mention
Sure.
that in 2 years, the amount that your municipality pays will be identical to what MD of Bighorn pays, for example. And we've been working to try to harmonize those to make those the same amount for some time.
Okay. And the value of services, you're saying, is for that amount, $136,000, the combined levy from the library board and the municipality being $136,000, the value that we're getting from that is $232,000. And those are actually real requisitions from Marigold? Like that's the service you're providing to the library board? It's not just a budget, it's an actual?
It's an actual. It's closer to an actual than anything. It's comprised of 3 things. So it's a difference of $113,000. When we add up all of the values of investment for all of our municipalities, it does not exceed our budget. And what comprises the value of your investment are 3 things. One, every time we buy a book, every time we buy a piece of computer equipment, every time we buy a widget, we count that towards your value of your investment. But there are some things, like our digital resources, that we pay a contract fee. So what we do with that is we divide it by the number of municipalities. We divide by 44 municipalities, and we add that to your value of your investment. And then the third thing we do is we do a cost estimate of what it takes to provide consultation services, IT support, advocacy services, and other things. And we add that all up, and it adds to a total. Does that kind of help?
Yeah, because we can see that those valuable things that we have access to are being used by our own local municipality, or municipal library board.
Right.
With the IT programming, are you keeping our computers running?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's
clearly
a very
Canmore
valuable
does
resource.
a lot of work in that regard, and so I don't want to diminish their contribution to this for sure.
But IT is a very expensive part of keeping that running, right?
Can I just tell you a little story? When Banff joined in 2014, they asked us to do a report for them, and we were very happy to do it for them, actually. They wanted to know if they went on their own and set up a library service like we could provide through Marigold, what would it cost?
So we added up the cost of our library system, which is $1 million. And we added up the other things that we do for them, like maintain the network and provide the licenses and stage the computers and pay for the programs and all of that. And then we also added the digital resources, et cetera, et cetera. And if they were to start up with the same level of service that we can provide them on day one, it would be $2.6 million. And then on a year-to-year basis, of course, we pay maintenance fees and contract fees and so on, it would be $900,000. So what you see in the value of your investment is just one portion for that one library, but it would be very difficult for any library to sustain the level of service that we can provide through being a cooperative.
Well, thank you. We all benefit from that. Thanks.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, just had a question about the e-books. I think you mentioned, or perhaps Michelle did, the percentage was about 10%, slightly more. Would you foresee that increasing and the physical inventory of books decreasing, and at what kind of rate? Do you have any sort of projection on that?
I did mention that between 8 to 10% of all the books that are borrowed are e-books, which is a very small component at this point in time. And even though we have 6 different platforms, which we provide e-books on, and we see use increasing, there are limitations in a couple of ways. Number one, e-books cost more than regular books, and especially e-audiobooks. They're close to $100 each for libraries to purchase. So we're using our budgets wisely, and we're going together cooperatively with other library systems to provide a database of, I'd say, about 30,000 titles. But we can't buy every book in ebook format. It's just not available in ebook format. And then some publishers have what we call is a sunset clause in a sense. So you can use you buy an ebook, you can use it maybe 26 times or 2 years, and then it's gone. Okay. And we have to rebuy it. So that's not the case with all of our ebooks, but there's different programs and different ways of acquiring those ebooks that kind of limits the amount of inventory we have. But it's clear that the most popular format for borrowing is e-audio.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so thanks very much again for being here. It's always interesting to, did you have something? No. Always interesting to hear how things are going with Marigold and the interaction between Marigold and our library and all the great work that's happening in that building. Thank you. Yeah, so thanks for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you on behalf of all of us. Thanks.
And we have one final delegation. EPCOR, Mr. Canmore.
I'm sorry.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Borman, members of council. So we're here as the last delegate to introduce EPCOR, who is our utilities provider for the town of Canmore, has been since May of 1999, so a very long time they've been in that role. Part of our contract with EPCOR is that there's a number of performance measures that they need to meet, and so what we normally do is once the year is done and they've been able to tabulate all of those results, we come in and visit council and share those results publicly so you can see how well they're performing within the various measures. We have Dennis Letourneau here, who's the site manager from EPCOR, to do the presentation, and to support him we have Kevin Visser, who's at the back, who can, if you would like, he can move up here to support the presentation if there are any questions for him. So with that, I will hand the presentation over to Dennis.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor and councillors. It's good to see you all.
Long time
it's
no
been a
see.
while. Yeah. 10 minutes, okay. It's funny that I was doing the 2015 presentation, if you recall, it was my first time, and I was struggling to find things to say to keep myself up here for 10 minutes. Now it's the opposite challenge, so we'll get right into it. We're going to cover the same topics we do every year, just a quick chat about EPCOR itself, what it brings to the table, looking at our 2017 highlights, the performance measures, and then a brief look at what's coming forward for us. You see this slide every year. I talk to it and I say how deep a bench EPCOR brings to the table, and it's all true, but it was never more true than in 2017 when we accessed that deep bench of expertise for 10 months straight to bring that wastewater treatment plant back into compliance with the approval. And for those of you who took the tour this morning, you see that we're accessing that deep bench of expertise yet again to solve a small issue we're having with the stickiness in the sea filters. So it's just an ongoing resource that I avail myself of quite often. Quick look at the 2017 highlights. No lost time works instance. In 2017, we kept our perfect record going for one more year. We completed all of the preventative maintenance tasks assigned. The BAF process disruption and rehabilitation was what really consumed most of my time in 2017, so that was the main focus for me for the year. But we also managed to do the backup power system upgrade at the plant. We started the phase 1 and completed the phase 1 of the influent well capacity upgrade, which is at the front of the plant. We did some flood mitigation work per advice and guidance from the town. So lift station 5, we moved all the electrical components higher up off the ground so that's not affected by flood water. At pump house 1, we've secured the fuel tanks so that they wouldn't float away if there's ever any high water there. And at the wastewater treatment plant, we have, of course, a critical generator that comes on if the power ever goes out. It has to run. And it needs diesel fuel to run. So how do you fill it up when the groundwater is above the entrance cap of the diesel tank? So we now have an extension standpipe where we can do that. We also started installing commercial meters for the first time. Up till now, we've been installing the residential meters every year, but last year was the first time we started tackling commercial meters, some of them at a cost of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to install with parts and installation. So it was a new undertaking. We got 32 of them in, and we got 107 meters in total last year. Let's go right into those performance measures that Andreas talked about. Same ones as always: safety, environment, customer satisfaction, and the quality, efficiency, performance index. Safety, we, despite the disruptions we had, we still managed to get 33 hours on average of training, safety training for every employee, which was above our target value. We did 552 preventative activities, again over the target, held all our 12 safety meetings, and we kept that perfect record of no lost time instance. A little spoiler alert, we did unfortunately incur one about 2 weeks ago. So our very first lost time incident in several years. One of our operators literally just took a step up the hill at the Grassy Reservoir. He was checking the lower hatch, he went to check the upper hatch. He just took a step. He didn't roll his ankle, he didn't slip, he didn't fall, he just took a step and he tore the calf muscle in the back. So he was out for, yeah, I know you would relate to that, Councillor McCallum. And he unfortunately was scheduled, it was a Friday afternoon, he was scheduled to work that weekend. We have 2 operators working every weekend. He happened to be scheduled to work that weekend and he couldn't. He was cleared for modified duties on Monday, but because he had to work that weekend and he was unable to work that weekend, we recorded our first lost time. But we did have a long run. On the environmental index, we only had 1 release. We were allowed 9, so we were well under the target there. We did have 1 contravention over the target. We had a total of 7. We're allowed 6. But 6 of those 7 contraventions were all TAN violations related to that 1 process disruption that created 6 TAN violations. If we had not had that process disruption, we only would have actually had 1 contravention last year. Proactive activities were 14 over our target of 9, and we made all of our regulatory reporting on time. Again, on the environment, again, we do over 5,000 tests on drinking water. Our tests on the wastewater are up now. Last year's slide I noticed had 2,000 tests. We are now doing 3,500 tests at our expense to give us a better idea of what is happening within the plant as a direct result of the process disruption and the guidance we had from our technical experts up in Edmonton. We're now doing 3,500 tests a year just on wastewater, and it gives us a better idea of what's going on throughout the plant and lets us plan a little better and prepare. This is the same format as I presented last year for water loss, now following the standard AWWA format, which we've been following now for 2 years straight. It shows, again, a fairly consistent pattern in the lost water throughout the various years, anywhere from 28 up to about 32%. The green band is the municipal use that we know that's recorded. And then, of course, the large dark blue band is all the water that we receive revenue for. On the environmental side, finally, of course, we always take samples upstream of the plant and downstream of the plant. Four locations in total, 2 upstream, 2 downstream. And in 2016, the impact of the plant was within the BRBC guidelines. In 2017, the exception was, again, the TAN that was going back into the river as a result of that same process disruption that we had last year. We were slightly over the guidelines, but as I explained when I was up here a few weeks ago, we did communicate with federal authorities and provided them data from our labs and temperatures, and they did their calculations and determined that we were not negatively, in fact, impacting the aquatic environment downstream. So they were satisfied that we were doing no harm. Customer satisfaction. We had about 10 service outages in 2016. 100% of them we got back in 24 hours, but in 2017 we had 28 service outages, primarily due to the ground frost issues that we had during the cold winter. And we got all but one up. We just simply ran out of heat trace hose on one situation where we just went over the 24-hour mark trying to get the water back to that particular residence, but everything else was restored within 24 hours. We didn't do a customer satisfaction survey last year. We had 13 community events over our target of 9. There were 2 reports we didn't get in on 2017. One was a cow report I missed by a day. I was asked to conduct an emergency instant investigation at another site, so I was gone for 3 days, got back, submitted the report, but I was 1 day late. The other report we missed was the communication report. It's simply because Michelle Springs left to be seconded to the drainage division, and while she was gone, they did not fill the position before the deadline for that report. Georgina Dakova came in, she did supply the report, but we missed the deadline, so that was the 2. The other 70 or so odd reports were all submitted on time. Activities on the Quality Efficiency Index, preventive maintenance, again, 100% completed. Both the natural gas and power consumption were below threshold. There's a visual on the power consumption for 4 years. You can see they're all fairly tightly packed. Not a huge change there, and all still under the threshold allowed within the contract. And on the gas side, you can see the top 2 lines are the 2014 and the 2017 years, 2 cold winters. And the bottom 2 lines are the 2015 and 2016 years, 2 mild winters. So the gas consumption is very much in line with the kind of winters we were having. Finally, quickly looking forward, we've got a couple water capital projects on the go. Of course, the water meter replacement program continues with more commercial and residential meters being scheduled this year. And we've got the South Bow River Loop water main design project, which is ongoing right now. On the wastewater side, we've got the influent well capacity upgrade. Now, this is the 2nd phase of that program. The mechanical systems upgrade continues from last year. We're going to wrap it up this year, as with the design of the dewatering system upgrade, which will flow right into the beginning of construction later at the end of the year, or at least procurement of equipment. Finally, we have the replacement of lift station 2 scheduled to begin construction hopefully this year. And finally, the replacement of lift station number 6, which is in the design phase. And I have 15 seconds to go, and we are done. So are there any questions?
That was too fast.
I've done this a couple times.
Couldn't absorb it and think of questions at the same time. No, I don't have any questions. Are there questions from other members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much once again for a really good report. You know, and particularly nice to hear or to be able to understand what it is that informs some of the data points being below or above target. That's pretty helpful. But we do get reports regularly from EPCOR, so it's, you know, there really aren't any surprises in the annual report, which is good. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
See you Thursday.
All right. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, what do we got next? Minutes. Okay, looking then to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of Tuesday, May the 8th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And here we are to the community event policy. Woohoo! Mrs. Bartolome. You gonna be that fast?
I'm sorry?
You gonna be as fast as
I don't think
Mr.
I will.
Letourneau?
No, I might be, but I don't
No.
think you'll
Oh.
have no questions.
Oh, I
Just
see
saying.
where this is going.
Mayor Barrowman, members of council, I'm here today to give you an opportunity to provide input to the community event policy, the draft that we're bringing forward today. Maybe
You
I'll
want to
put
just
the
tip
slide
your
up.
mic down a little bit? Ms. Bartolome?
Pardon me?
Could you tip your mic down a little bit?
Yep.
Thank you.
Canmore has a long history of hosting public events in sport, culture, and recreation. The 2010 policy statement said that these experiences were recognized contributors to the quality of life in the community, that they have a significant value to citizens, that they have economic benefit, and that they are a vital ingredient to ongoing development of Canmore's sustainability. It was further stated in the 2010 policy that the town of Canmore will contribute to increased community vitality by committing to support an exciting and vibrant range of community events, our diverse cultural character and celebration of our living heritage, and community events as economic drivers. We've done this. As a matter of fact, our success of attracting and growing events has resulted in natural growth pressures, stretching town of Canmore operations, community infrastructure and resources, and volunteer resources. The town of Canmore continues to value potential economic and socio-cultural contributions well-organized events bring to Canmore. However, we do realize that events also come with impacts that can have a negative effect on residents, businesses, and neighborhoods. They can affect the environment, contribute to crowding, noise, traffic issues, cause resident angst, and reduced access to local amenities. As event applications and tourism traffic increases, so has the need for a comprehensive policy that addresses operational impacts, including road closures and cost recovery. The 2010 policy is no longer relevant or adequate. The proposed 2018 policy statement says, the approval of community events and film permits will be based on principles intended to build community, enhance quality of life for residents and visitors, and provide appropriate and fair pricing. The purpose of the policy is to establish the criteria that we will use in the event and film permit approval process, establish the community event classification and associated fee structure for cost recovery purposes, provide administration with a tool to make fair, equitable, transparent, and consistent approval and fee-for-service decisions, and establish the conditions under which roads and public places will be closed and managed for community events and film production. The following criteria will be used to evaluate event permits. Excuse me. Community impact. Is the event relevant to the culture and identity of the community? Does it offer an experience-based, authentic celebration of our mountain lifestyle? Does it have a reasonable impact on residents, businesses, and visitors? Has it addressed both positive and negative feedback regarding the event from application through delivery? And is it accessible, inclusive, and affordable? Community event performance. Has the event complied to policy, procedure, and regulations? Is it in good financial standing? Were all application and reporting deadlines met? Resource requirements. Do town departments have within its allocated budgets the staffing, equipment, and the capacity to deliver the requested services? And for planning purposes, the request was made 60 days in advance. Do we have what it physically takes to support the event by way of infrastructure? Does the event line with the town's strategic goals? Have there been too many requests for the same weekend or too many of the same kinds of events? Does the event source local products and services, and do they include local businesses as vendors where available? Health, safety, and the environment. Is public safety at front of mind for them? Do they have minimal impact to wildlife, to the environment, and is there access for emergency response? And then, of course, the last one that's not listed here is logistics. Is everything in? Do you adhere to government policy and legislation? Permits are in, plans are in, licensing is in place, that kind of thing. The town of Canmore community events have grown. The town and the community events have grown. The requests for road closures, especially on Main Street, have grown. Road closures for events bring a vibrancy and energy to our public places and often lead to a festive atmosphere in the downtown core. They also bring complaints. The road closure philosophical principles will assist administration in determining when a road closure should be permitted. It also speaks to proper and appropriate signage, not just indicating that the road's closed, but that businesses are open. Road closures may be necessary to facilitate a community event that meets its criteria outlined in this policy or in a film permit. Main Street closures will be approved if the community event has a broad national, provincial, or community relevance. For example, things like Canada Day, the Miners' Day, National Indigenous Peoples' Day parades. The event committee will consult with local businesses and residents before permitting a road closure. And downtown road closures will be identified with positive signage posted by the town of Canmore indicating that there is an event in progress and that downtown's open for business.
So can I interrupt with a question? Where would those sorts of signs go?
Where will they go?
The last one there.
They'll go at places like, depending on where the closure is. So at the beginning of a closure, it'll say that the road is closed, but that businesses will open. They're not just going to meet up with a big barricade that says, stop, don't come in, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for more positive signage in those locations.
So would it be just one sign sort of at Main Street where the closure is, or would there be preliminary signage, say up on Bull Valley Trail or something?
Mm-hmm. So what we've tried to do is to have our electronic signage boards up in those locations indicating that there may be a race in progress or there may be a parade happening and that downtown will be open, so we'll put it on electronic signs. And then we'll also have signs made that will say this is what's happening, that we'll post right on the barricades.
Great, thanks.
I know this is a lot of information on one slide. So just so you know, in the policy that was given to you in your packages, although the pyramid is correct, the corresponding information doesn't relate to the pyramid as it should. The original pyramid didn't have quite as many slices, and so I've changed the descriptions beside it to match the pyramid. A cost recovery pyramid model will be used to establish appropriate and fair pricing for the rental of spaces and the provision of services. Lower fees will be charged to those community events that provide the most community benefit. The benefit of each community event can be considered and cost recovery levels assigned using the cost recovery pyramid. So the pyramid's up here in the board. It's also in your package. So the thing at the very top, film productions, is thought to having the least community benefit. It's highly commercial, and it will be charged at 150% of what the rate is. This is using the same type of model that is used in recreation where the services that don't benefit the entire community are at a higher level than the bottom part of the pyramid. So film productions will be at 150%. Commercial will be at 125%, and that's commercial non-resident. Commercial that are commercial community events raising funds for non-resident businesses, cause or charity, or commercial community events raising funds for resident business, cause, or charity are at 75%. Not-for-profits that charge an entry fee will be at 50%. Not-for-profits that charge no entry fee or that are town-sponsored in some way will be at 25%. Town of Canmore events or grandfather events will not pay a fee.
So something like the, I don't know, Rocky Mountain Soap Co race would be commercial resident, 75%?
That's correct. Things that are grandfathered are things like the Highland Games and the Folk Festival. That would be charged 0%.
In your report, you note that's the recommendation. Are you going to sort of delve into that and explain rationale, or are we just supposed to understand?
You're just supposed to understand. Yeah.
Moving on then?
Moving on. The rationale behind it, of course, is that events have grown. The number of events, the size of the events, the pressure placed on town departments, the amount we spend on events, which we'll talk about in financial implications. That's one of the reasons we're going to a cost recovery model. Some of the other reasons are that perhaps something like minor soccer is paying a rate for a field that we're not charging event groups for. And we just want to make everything fair and equitable across the board. So that's another part of the rationale around it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the pyramid is great. Totally understand the rationale. I was asking about the rationale in forming the grandfathering of the two events.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry. Things like the Folk Festival not only have cost the town money in terms of resources that we commit to the festival, but they also have been really instrumental in helping with Centennial Park, with sodding, with getting grants to upgrade electricity, with help in building the stage, those kinds of things. So they look for partnering opportunities so that we can improve our amenities. So that was one of the reasons it was considered. Also things like Highland Games, who are thought to give wide community benefit. We would benefit them. We would grandfather them as well. And it is just a recommendation, so by all means. They've been around forever, and they also contribute to the vitality of downtown and to the culture of Canmore and our long-standing events.
Great. Councillor Seeley, did you have a question?
Yeah, just on that, I completely agree. They're two very good events, and it's nice that Folk Festival contributes so much. Part of the rationale, though, is grandfathered for zero, maybe a bigger reduction than the 25%. Maybe take a look at 10% charge. And certainly the Highland Games, they're revived, and we want them to continue to be healthy. So maybe 5 years grandfathered at zero, and then if they're healthy and everything else, they can pay a certain amount. And I'm just throwing ideas out there.
Absolutely.
It just merits some consideration that if everyone else is paying, they should pay something, but it should be reduced better than the minimum 25%.
Good enough.
Just an idea.
And that's something the council could implement at approval stage on the policy.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Yep. Go on.
Okay. So the process, of course, comes with responsibilities. So we do have a council-appointed community event committee, and that committee is responsible for, they meet twice a year to evaluate events that come in twice a year. So we now do a twice annual call for events, one that's happening during summer, events for the summer months, and then events over the winter months. So the event committee gets together at those times in the year. They evaluate all the applications that come in, and they approve or deny community events. Not film permits, but community events at that time, in accordance with the policy. They provide administration with policy plan, practice, and procedural recommendations, and recommendations regarding education and information sharing opportunities for community event stakeholders. And they establish and maintain a process to require advanced submitting of community event applications to allow for a holistic review of multiple community events occurring within a defined time frame, to ensure the right balance of type and number of community events occur at any time and location. The Arts and Events Department will communicate with community event applicants on status of application and assist and advise through the permitting process. Will coordinate access to town places and services and assist community event organizers in procuring the required permits. Will provide trained and qualified personnel to organize and deliver high-quality Town of Canmore community events. Will establish pricing and forward invoices to community event producers using the master fee schedule in accordance with the user classification set out in this policy. Complete a community event debriefing report jointly with the community event producer to define and record successes and areas of improvement at future events. Will provide reporting in accordance with this policy. Will review and update community event evaluation tool used by the community event committee, and will evaluate and approve or decline film permit applications. All town departments will determine the cost of services provided and equipment owned by the town to facilitate the Arts and Events Department in delivering a master fee schedule. And council will review this policy at least once every 4 years and approve master fee schedule. Financial impacts. Over the past year, administration has been tracking event cost and has provided all user groups with an invoice. The invoice has what the services and equipment would have cost. Okay, we give them, but they've all received 0 bills. All town departments who provides event support, except for arts and event staff, have been tracking their hours and resources used to support each of the events. This practice will continue going forward so that the town can appropriately track what our event support actually is, and to allow not-for-profit organizations to claim the in-kind support. There will be a request in 2019 budget for some event signage to be used on Main Street and other road closures, and that's the positive event signage I was talking about. From May till October of 2017, the administration estimated that the town provided $50,000 of in-kind support to all types of event groups, whether they are community-based, not-for-profit, or for-profit, and the in-kind support provided from November 17th till April 12th. It's still being calculated, but we're working it out about $20,000 to $25,000. The cost recovery model that we're proposing in the policy will have an eventual positive financial impact, as currently most town involvement is provided at no cost at all. Stakeholder engagement. The input of the Community Event Committee was considered in writing this proposed policy, and the draft document was circulated to town departments for review and recommendations, and the recommendations were incorporated into the document. Events held from May 1st, 2017 till October 1st, 2017 have all received in-kind invoices and a letter indicating that policy changes and the potential fees for service would be considered in 2018. Events from November 1st, 2017 and April 30th, 2018 will receive their in-kind invoices and a letter about potential changes before the proposed new policy comes to council for approval on July 3rd. So we're still working out the details on those. Developing a good road closure policy, developing a road closure policy and hopefully a good one, and updating the event policy was identified as a business plan action in the 2017-2018 business plan, address traffic and congestion in the downtown core. And that is the end of my presentation. So, questions, comments?
Thank you. I'd start off by saying I think there's a lot of good work that's gone into the policy, and I think it's really good policy. I do have a few questions, as others might. Just something you just said got me wondering about something related, but the, and I don't think I saw it in here, the controls around, so weddings at Quarry Lake, for instance, and we had, I think we put in place controls on how wedding guests get there through the permitting procedure. I mean, am I right in thinking that if you have a wedding at Quarry Lake, you have to get your guests up there through shuttle, or?
Here to provide a transportation plan. So weddings are booked through facility bookings, and we do work with the facilities booking people to see what's going on at any given place at any given time when we're approving events, and someone from that department sits in on the event committee so that they can say, oh, this is what's going on. But now I'm pretty certain, but I'll check in with Sally out, that they do have to provide a transportation plan.
Yeah, just, I'll add to that. So something like booking, this is a little confusing, booking a wedding for Quarry Lake is in recreation. It's managed in recreation. It's not managed in arts and events. So a race that's held at Quarry Lake, like a paddleboard race or a triathlon, that's booked through arts and events. A wedding is a facility booking through recreation. Right. So it's fairly confusing. But yes, for weddings, which is a facility booking through recreation, you do have to provide a transportation plan.
And for race events or whatever that's booked through arts and events, same thing?
We do require a transportation and parking plan. Mm-hmm.
Great. Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Ms. Bartolome, for that. There's a lot of work been done here, and it will be to good effect. One of the questions, the invoice thing with the zero balance, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's very good data for your organizations to use when they're applying for grants, and it's always difficult to calculate. So to have something like that from the municipality is excellent. Was there a consult with the BRZ and other groups, Chamber of Commerce, in developing the policy, or just for feedback?
No, not the Chamber of Commerce, but certainly the BRZ. The BRZ's on the community event committee, so they had input all along. And as a matter of fact, in early conversations, they had 2 members on that committee. So,
okay. And then let me see. Yeah. So, so this past weekend there was an event, and the traffic was backed up, and I was on my bicycle and walking, stumbling around, and was glad to be that. But I also drove, and it wasn't a big deal because I'm local, so I sort of know which alleys to go down and where to come out. And I believe Ms. Caudill also let us know that there's going to be a debrief and kind of a how do we address this. And I really applaud you for that ongoing kind of supervision, or if you will, or deconstructing to try and figure out what the solutions are to our traffic issues such as they are. But those traffic jams are nothing compared to, I don't know, downtown Toronto, I'm just saying. So anyway, I think we'll be able to fix that. I think that will get better. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Bartolome. I just had a follow-up question with regards to the parking management plan. So we asked them to provide a parking management plan.
We do.
Do we actually check to see that they followed through on using their parking management plan?
No, we don't.
Okay.
We asked them to provide a parking plan. We asked, as part of that parking plan, we want to know how they're going to get it out to their registrants and to the people that will be coming to their event. So in the case of the RMCC this weekend and the CRIT, they provided a parking plan to us, and they were to get that out on their website to let people know where they should park. So we do check up on the communication. Has this been communicated? Have you done what you said you're going to do on the, we can't make people do it beyond that point, or it's difficult to. But we certainly want to make sure they're using all the right ways to reach out to their groups to say, this is what our plan is, this is where you should park, this is where there's parking available.
Gotcha. So in the case of a wedding up at Quarry, then so we're asking them to shuttle or to use a bus or something like that, but then we have no way of enforcing what we've asked them to do. And I know it's about resources and so on, but I don't know, I see Ms. Caudill.
Yeah, I don't know about weddings so much, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I can respond to the weddings things. We don't have staff who go up and check. We do, similar to what Ms. Bartolome was saying around event plans, we do, make sure that they have a plan in place and follow up on whether or not they've communicated it, but we're not able to physically go to every wedding at Quarry Lake, and, I don't know what we would do. They've already paid for the rental. We could ticket them, tell them not to get married. There's not a whole lot we can do except to say that it's our expectation with the current resources we have.
Isn't there a deposit or anything with the permit?
Pardon me?
Is there a deposit with the permit?
Yeah, they would have already paid fully.
Pardon me?
They would have fully paid by the time the event happens.
There's no deposit that they get back if they tidy up or anything?
No.
No.
Not on a, again, a facility booking is different than what we're talking about with this policy. So a facility booking of the quarry is, it's like booking a room. You pay to book the room and then you use it. So we don't take like a parking deposit currently for something like a facility booking. I did want to just jump back also to Councillor Comfort's question. I think it's important to understand that if we're going to continue to allow road closures for things like the crit, we are going to have traffic backups. So no matter how much feedback we get and continue to work with groups like that, and we will continue to work with them to make adjustments, traffic is going to be impacted. So I just want that to be clear that if we're doing those types of events, there will be impacts. We cannot mitigate so that it's as if the event isn't happening. When we close a road on a Saturday, there are traffic impacts. We want to make sure they're not unreasonable, but we can't fully eliminate them.
And if I can just add to what Ms. Cottle said, the other thing is that we also, the Nordic Centres events were just getting out at the same time as the traffic was being impacted coming over the bridge. So we have no way of controlling that or how many weddings are happening in town. There's so many variables or what's happening on any given weekend anywhere. So we can do our best to say you have to keep this open or you have to have it earlier in the morning or you have to have it on a less busy weekend. We can do all of those things and we can encourage, you know, active transportation, but just as a follow-up to that. Yeah. I'm sorry.
What?
Do I get to ask? Do I get my time back? Yes. Can I have my time back, please?
Okay.
Thanks.
One more.
So that's good information to have. I think as we grow and as this policy grows, we may want to take a look at, just because we asked them to go through all the trouble of doing that. And I'm not saying this year or right now, but at some point we're probably as a community going to have to start looking at enforcing those parking management plans that we ask them, our people to use into the future. The other question I had was in terms of the request for grandfathering those two event organizations, would that be something that's grandfathered within the policy, or would that be something that's grandfathered within the master fee schedule?
Also a good question, because right now we have it grandfathered in the policy.
Which only comes once every 4 years.
That's right.
Whereas we have the opportunity, if it's within the master fee schedule, I'm not saying that's the answer, but that might be an answer for us to be able to approve that on an annual basis.
Okay.
Because you never know how an organization could change.
That's right.
Right? It could be a nonprofit and suddenly become a for-profit, or I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but we have no idea.
Yeah, if it was a profit that became a nonprofit, we have a way to deal with that within the policy.
Yeah.
But if it's grandfathered, and we've said it's grandfathered for into eternity, I mean, we could also put it in the policy that it needs to be reviewed.
They would have no obligation to inform us that their status had changed,
Exactly,
really.
yeah.
So from a paperwork and Revenue Canada, that's out of our wheelhouse. So anyways, I'm just curious as to how that would roll.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it'd be typical, the master fee schedule is literally lists a service and a fee. So we would have to fundamentally change the master fee schedule to say does not apply to Folk Fest, does not apply to Highland Games.
Well, you could put an asterisk with that underneath
right,
it, could you
except
not?
then if they wanted something, they changed their service and needed something we hadn't identified in the master fee schedule. I think it's a good question about where it best fits. I think we'll need to think about it. The reality is we could put language in the policy that if we were to grandfather them in, which I'm hearing maybe actually we want to think about not necessarily grandfathering them in, but a sliding scale or bringing them up to appropriate fees over time. So Chris and I will talk about that before this is back to council, but if it were in policy, we could put the wording that was clear that they couldn't change the nature of the organization. And even if they did turn from a for-profit to a profit, they have to go through the events department in order to get their permit. So we would be able to manage it annually through the event permit.
Gotcha.
But we'll have to think about the best way to place it.
And I forgot, we're not approving this today. It's just coming to committee of the whole for council referral.
That's right.
So, thank you. Sorry. Thanks.
Just one last thought on that. It's not that difficult to bring a policy back to change. Yeah. But if there was a reason to want to change something in the policy, it's easy to bring it back.
I mean,
Councillor Seeley?
You had something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to the other thing that could happen is we don't necessarily have to list specific events. We could just talk about events that are grandfathered, and that could be outside of the policy in a procedural document. So there's other ways to address it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Bartolome. Lots of excellent work. Just back to traffic, because everyone talks about it, and events. The crit just happened. I thought I saw some flags people out for to manage the traffic. Did that happen? Is that part of their management plan? No?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Just did they have flags people out at 8th and 8th?
Yeah, they did.
And there's still a backlog just because there's so much traffic, but at least that's part of it, so it made it a lot better than it would have otherwise been.
Yeah, certainly this year was much better than last year for a number of reasons. First of all, there wasn't construction on Main Street, so that helped. Secondly, everything that came up last year as area pressure points, we indicated that they would need flag people in those places. We did offer some flag person training, and they did take us up on some of that as well, so that was good. So there was some systems put in place, and they held their event earlier in the day, and they also held their event earlier in the season so that we weren't going to have as much impact. So they've been really great at working with us to help us manage those traffic things, and some of it is just traffic, right? So,
good.
Yeah.
And something else, I see a lot of language in about Main Street, and people really don't want it closed. And when I think of Rogers Hometown Hockey, it was a great event. We did close Main Street. Is there a different way of looking at events like that? They're big. We want to make sure that we showcase Canmore. Maybe there's a different street we can close instead of Main Street because the pressure is on Main Street. Don't know where to go with that, but I know that it's not going to go away. Closing Main Street is big. For Canada Day, it's happened for a long time. That makes sense. Bigger events, maybe they can be persuaded to do something else.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably what we'll hope to do. We'll look at the event, we'll see if it has national, provincial, or municipal relevance. You know, is it an event like Canada Day, National Indigenous Peoples Day, Miners Day, those kinds of things? Is it really important to our community? And we'll rate it in that way. And we'll look at other ways that perhaps we could fit them in, I don't know, something like the rec center parking lot. And I'm just, you know, talking off the top of my head here, but certainly we'll try and sway other groups to other locations, and we do. You know, we ask them to consider the Nordic Centre, we ask them to consider other locations. We realize that downtown or Main Street in particular is a sensitive area for closures, and it just backs up traffic as well. So
even 7th Avenue, even though Rogers Hometown Hockey would be larger than that, 10th Street might be a possibility, have less impact to the businesses on Main Street. Just ideas like that.
Absolutely, and there's lots to consider. There's emergency access routes, which is what 10th Street basically is. It's how we get out of the fire hall and use that area. So there's a lot of things to consider when we're doing road closures, and it would be much better if we had a dedicated event space. This is where it happens, or we had something that was, that sort of thing would make life easier for sure.
Thanks.
Just a couple of questions about the evaluation criteria. So several years ago, you'll recall there was sort of an agreement in place with the tourism agency at the time, TCPT, that there wouldn't be any additional summer events encouraged during the high season. So in following through on that thought, in the evaluation criteria 4.1a, community impact, I'm looking for seasonal. So somewhere I saw seasonal. Yeah, market demand, F, in that 4.1F. Market demand is one of the criteria. So I'm inferring from this that because season, it references competition, seasonal competition. Is there anything in place or through this policy that would stress that more events in the summer aren't to be encouraged?
We certainly have an event committee that talks about whether or not more events are encouraged. We look holistically at what's come in. So if we get 30 event applications at the same time, we look at how many weddings are happening in places, how many events are being asked for on the same weekend, how many of the same kind of events, what the attendance at that event, that particular event is. If it's an event that has 80 people, the impact is really low. If it has an impact of, like 15,000 people over the course of 3 days, well, then the impact is huge. So we haven't said anything about limiting the number of events. It's just making sure they're spread out through the summer, that impacts are considered, that the numbers of people going to them, how many streets may need to be closed, all those kinds of things will be in place through this policy. We don't necessarily think that more is better. We think that stronger, healthier events are better. And that's what we'd like to encourage, but we don't have a mechanism to... We can just say there's through this policy that there's too many of those types of events happening at this time, and we can't approve you right now. That doesn't mean they can't come back to the table the following year and change things up or look for a different weekend or those kinds of things. So right now there's not any kind of hold on the number of events we can have per season.
Right, so it just comes down to the decision of the events committee?
Correct. Who's been appointed by council.
Yep. And I guess in the same context, talking again about Quarry Lake, we know and the weddings are outside of the purview of this policy, I get that. But we know there's 5 or 6 weddings up there every day on the weekend in the summer. Yeah, there can be.
No. We book weddings in 3-hour blocks, so unless they're getting married in the middle of the night.
Well, let's say 4 weddings then.
Okay, let's say that.
Yeah, because I've driven past. Anyway, so knowing that's likely, would the special events committee then simply not agree to any sporting events or race events or something at the Quarry Lake on a summer Saturday?
What we do is any events that happen up at Quarry Lake, we ask them to be cleaned up and out of there by noon, because typically events start to happen at 1 o'clock. They're not happening at 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning, that kind of thing. They generally happen beginning from 1 till 4, and then in the evenings are the typical wedding times. So when we do approve a triathlon or any kind of event up there, we ask the event producers to get out of there by noon.
We can ask.
They do a pretty good job of it, and we do ask.
In H, in the same section, 4.1H, health, safety, and environment, one of the criteria is looking for minimal impact to wildlife and the environment. Is that just sort of a gut feeling? I mean, how does the events committee define minimal?
We don't go into areas that are wildlife corridors. We don't. We make sure that we have proper garbage bins and that kind of thing, that they have that waste recovery stations in place. We keep track of, sometimes at the time when the event is approved, we can't tell that, but after the event's been approved, if we have closures for wildlife, we have them, they all have to have a solid plan B if they're in an area where that could happen. Like Quarry Lake, last year there was a Roxy event that had to move at the last minute because the whole area around Quarry Lake was closed, so they had to move up to the Nordic Center. So having them have strong plan Bs if they're going to be in those kinds of areas is really important.
Great. One last question for me. In the same section in evaluation criteria for 1A2, so just talking about experience, the event should offer an experience-based, authentic celebration of Canmore's mountain lifestyle. But how's that? I mean, there is no definition of that. One person's experience-based, authentic celebration of mountain lifestyle can be quite different from somebody else's. So there is no definition of Canmore's mountain lifestyle. And how do we talk about an authentic celebration of something that isn't real?
That isn't real. I think we do have a mountain lifestyle, and that's why...
I'm actually asking her.
Do you want to answer? I truly believe that we do have a mountain lifestyle, and I think that we have, it's more things that are outside of that lifestyle, things that we won't permit, like the wakeboarding thing that happened years ago here is clearly outside of what we do here in the mountains. So, I mean, there's things that are clearly not those things. There's things that maybe there's some gray areas, but clearly, like, we're not going to have to, you know, I mean, Andrew used to always say, we're not going to have monster trucks on Main Street, where some guy might say, oh, well, that, but I have a monster truck, that's my culture, but it's not an overarching Canmore culture. So I think that it's more what we're not rather than what we are.
Yeah, I guess the value is just in putting this in the policy. Just, but it's really hard to very specifically, tightly apply. Just a thought. Councillor Comfort.
Oh, I think, did you have a question?
I guess the board's not working. Councillor Sanford. Your light didn't pop
We're
up.
all on. Well, my light went on when I hit my button, so I don't know. Anyway, I think that issue that you were just raising, Mayor Borman, about what is authentic, the event producer still has the ability to appeal the refusal of an application to town council. So I guess if the committee decides that it doesn't fit the criteria, the event producer could still come to council.
That's correct.
And I think we've had that occur before, so, you know, it seems to be a reasonable process. I think the policy is quite good. I think it covers a lot of things that we've been grappling with. One of the questions I had about under 5 road closures, 5.3, the event committee will consult with local businesses and residents before permitting a road closure. You currently do that, is that correct?
We do.
And so the process in neighborhoods is going door to door?
That's right. We send out relevant neighbor letters. We do it 3 weeks in advance. And we have event groups put one of our names on it so that they're not calling the event group to say, hey, we're mad about your event, and the event group, you know, so they put a Town of Canmore name, mine, or right now Claudia's, who's the event permitting person, and they call us to let us know what's up.
And so do you, when you do it for the business community, do you do it door to door as well, or do you do it through the BRZ? We do it through the BRZ. Okay. So the BRZ's notified, and then they don't notify their memberships?
Yeah, it's our expectation that they would reach out to their membership, yes.
And you already have a process in place for this?
We do.
Yeah, so it's not new, but it's in the policy very clearly. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Yeah, I just had a question. When you do deny an event, do you give them the reasons?
We do.
Okay.
And, you know, some of them are denied, and they're denied by saying, I'm sorry, we can't host this event on this weekend. And we give them maybe other weekends that they could have their event. Or we're not approving this event because it doesn't align with any of the things. Like, I'm sorry that this isn't the right place for you. We don't have the infrastructure to support you. It's mostly for reasons that are there. And if we don't have the infrastructure, we're not going to suddenly have it. So we try to work with them if we can to get them up to a place where we can say yes and have them be successful. But if it's a no, sometimes that's just the way it is. We just can't help them out.
And I have a second question, with your permission, Your Worship. I may have missed it, but is there something in the policy about zero waste, about, you know, our
towards zero waste,
step, you know, all that stuff? Is there anything in there about that?
It's under logistics as far as making sure that all regulations are it's part of the permitting process. Every event has to provide a towards zero waste plan, so a waste management plan. And we look for them to divert 80% of their waste from the landfill.
Okay, so do we, will the Town of Canmore assist them in that, in the sense that they will provide services for fee if they don't have their own resources?
We currently provide them with most of the bins they need, or towards zero waste kits. We are not charging them right now, but that is something that was outlined when we were telling what would it cost them to rent the bins, or to rent a tent, or to rent those kinds of things for us to set them up a station.
Okay.
So we drop off all the equipment. We tell them we give the labels to them. They're supposed to provide it and get rid of it, and then we pick the bins back up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If there's no further questions from members of council, thanks very much, Ms. Bartolome. I look forward to this coming back for an approval, and I agree, it's really a well-considered, well-written policy.
Thank you.
And according to the agenda, we're supposed to call a short break after this. So I will. but not 15 minutes, because I think the next one's going to drag on as well. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Well, no. Back. And the next item is the Integrated Transportation Plan and Integrated Parking Management Plan. Mr. Asarte.
Good afternoon, Council. I'd like to start by introducing Claire Ellick, who joined our team as Transportation Engineer at the end of April. Ms. Ellick has been a part-time resident of Canmore for 4 years and rock guides in her spare time. In her prior roles with the City of Edmonton, Ms. Ellick was a senior engineer with 2 groups there, the Sustainable Transportation Group and most recently with Urban Initiatives. Together, we're here to present draft submissions of the Integrated Parking Management Plan and technical updates to the 2014 Integrated Transportation Plan. Together, these high-level planning documents are going to provide the basis for projects and initiatives that will address Council's priority of managing traffic congestion and parking in the town centre. And they'll ensure that our community effectively manages travel demand growth in a way that's consistent with our community values. In previous presentations to Council, we reviewed current and future congestion and parking management challenges that we can expect to have to address. These challenges define our problem. We outlined in those presentations the link between the ways in which we manage transportation and outcomes for our community. And that link is again made in the briefing report submitted with the draft plans. This link between outcomes and community values and goals inform the solutions we've looked at. I encourage anyone that's listening in or viewing this after the fact to view the previous CAL presentation online and to visit the website where we have several videos and other content that provides more detail on transportation planning in our community. The draft parking and transportation plans have been submitted with the Committee of the Whole agenda. Our presentation will touch on a number of the strategies outlined in the parking study and on the recommended technical updates to the transportation plan. I propose that we present on each area fully and then have a question period after each. Clarifying questions throughout the presentations, of course, are welcome. If that format works for Council, I'll start with the parking plan.
You bet.
The Integrated Parking Management Plan identifies specific strategies to encourage more efficient use of parking resources in order to achieve our community's goals, objectives, and targets. Development of this plan is part of our current business plan. It was identified as an action and is one of the ways administration is addressing Council's priority of managing traffic congestion and parking in the town centre. The plan's development has been guided by established planning documents, including the MDP, Integrated Transportation Plan, and the 2018 Parking Study, and it was further informed through a series of workshops with key stakeholders and a community open house in April. Like all successful communities, Canmore has parking challenges. These problems have been defined as difficulty finding parking in some areas during some business hours, peak periods, and this issue increases congestion. We also have a problem with underutilization otherwise, as we have a large amount of both private and public parking, which is less than 50% utilized during a large percentage of business hours. Our parking utilizes a lot of space, and space for people is becoming one of our large constraints to vibrancy and growth in the town centre. Parking management involves efficiently using these facilities, so the most convenient parking spaces are managed to give priority to the most urgent and important trips. And parking management is about reducing demand for our parking spaces so that we can free that space up for transportation initiatives and for town centre enhancement. We started the plan development by establishing performance targets. These targets are based on utilization rates set out in the parking study and parking management best practice. Consideration was given to the effectiveness, ease, and cost of implementation, and whether the strategies benefited other strategic planning objectives, and whether the strategies would also address peak period traffic congestion. To that end, a number of strategies were considered, each with the potential for reducing demand, and also a number which reduce traffic. The plan gives further consideration to a prioritization of parking use. Not all parking areas should be treated the same. High-value use is prioritized on Main Street and other street-side parking on downtown streets. High-value and longer duration stays prioritized in convenient parking lots. And lower-value, longer duration stay encouraged at parking areas a short distance walk to locations in the town center. I'll touch now on several of the key strategies. The first is that parking is most efficient when it's shared. You can squeeze much more use out of a parking stall that serves multiple destinations in a wide range of business hours than a private restricted stall, for example. And more use means you require less spaces. To increase sharing, recommendations include making more efficient use of curbside parking, having more shared lots versus private stalls, reducing to the extent possible private restrictions, encouraging a secondary market for parking stalls that are private and potentially underutilized, and creating public intercept parking outside the town core. Our community is implementing substantial pedestrian and bicycling improvements and enhancing transit service. For parking management, special analysis should examine obstacles to walking and bicycling between the facilities we have and destinations. So those facilities could be residential areas around the town center, commercial areas, our hotel districts. Looking at the connections to those areas and at removing barriers. Exhibit 12 identifies potential walking routes. Proposal in the plan to theme these walks, promote these walks as part of the attraction of visiting the town center, and leveraging information at the hospital or the hotels, wayfinding signage, hotel bicycle share, to try to encourage people as much as possible to travel from Visitor Calm along Bow Valley Trail, where we have a significant number of parking stalls. Parking regulation changes are proposed to prioritize high-value use. 4-hour duration maximums are recommended by destination marketing professionals. This maximizes visitor spend, and this is recommended for all of our prime parking areas. Right now we have 2-hour parking in a lot of areas. If we've gone through the effort of attracting people to come from distance to be in Canmore, we want to give them an opportunity to shop and dine and spend a reasonable amount of time in the town center. Further, pricing parking is the most effective way to reduce parking problems. It improves user convenience by ensuring that motorists can always find a convenient parking space, even during peak periods in areas with high demand. The plan recommends keeping parking free in most parking areas and for most of the time. It further recommends that when pricing is applied, it's applied during peak periods, and that the first 30 minutes on street are free, and that's to facilitate short errands and pick up and drop off. Where pricing is applied, it's only in those areas with high utilization, and the rates are set just high enough to ensure that on any block there's parking available when people are seeking it. There's a seasonality to it. Fares are reduced or eliminated during off-season, depending on location. It's further recommended that free parking is made available a short walk away in the town center, and that consideration is given for intercept parking areas that are free. Lastly, it's recommended that revenue benefits the areas that fares are collected from, such as funding fare-free transit or other parking management initiatives, and to fund town center enhancement. Lastly, it's suggested that flexibility be built in to allow any pricing and locations for pricing to be tested and adjusted to meet the plan goals. Spillover parking problems refer to undesirable use of off-site parking facilities, such as when business customers and employees park on nearby residential streets or use other business parking lots. This plan recommends closely monitoring spillover effects and tackling them through providing better information, indicating where motorists may and may not park, use of regulation to control spillover impacts in a residential parking management zone, and those regulations could include time limits and permit programs. Recommends establishing a monitoring program to identify where parking spillover is a problem. This may include parking surveys for any areas where residents have reported problems. The area for monitoring and managing has been outlined in the plan, but again, with some flexibility, could be modified based on issues that are observed. Bicycle parking can take up as little as 10% of the space of vehicle parking. We recommend that bicycle parking be distributed throughout the town center in highly desired locations. We're also proposing to reduce on-sidewalk bicycle parking, especially in some of the areas that are quite congested already on those sidewalks. This will free up additional walking space and reduce some of the conflict of people getting their bikes up onto the sidewalks to get to those parking spaces. This means adding in more bicycle parking on street to fill in gaps in the inventory, and this mapping shows where parking is currently located and would be used and incorporated into the final report as a guide for locations to consider for adding in additional spaces. The plan recommends reviewing our current parking requirements and adjusting those requirements based on a number of factors outlined in Exhibit 11. With increased density, high walkability, bicycle infrastructure, and efficient transit, Canmore provides excellent options to allow individuals and families to reduce the number of cars they own. The plan further recommends that we can reconsider the parking cash and lieu policy. The current policy anticipates the need to create expensive structure parking for each stall that a development cannot provide on site for their customers and staff. The plan suggests that this is a level of contribution that's not justified for the town center and creates a major financial burden for redevelopment. And we've seen that in the levels of redevelopment around town versus the level of redevelopment happening in the downtown. The plan recommends reducing this fee to $5,000 to $10,000 to reflect that off-site parking and other parking management strategies are much more efficient than creating strictly on-site parking for this development. And that for the town center, relatively few employees and customers require nearby parking. Generally, there are options available, short walking distance. It's recommended that the town continue with success we've had in working with a group, working group for parking management that has a number of key stakeholders, and that we expand it to include additional key stakeholders, including the Hotel Association, who we see as being a big part of the solution, and the Chamber. This group would work with administration to monitor progress towards the plan, address issues, and inform recommendations administration makes to council. Further, we're recommending that previous and future fees collected for price parking and cash in lieu be reinvested into the town center to fund both strategies of the parking management plan and for town center enhancement itself. By reinvesting into the town center, we introduce a funding source for planned and needed projects and increase the commercial vitality. This is going to contribute to a successful and vibrant town center, which is core to our current municipal development planning. With that, I'll end my presentation and open up for questions on the plan as presented.
Thanks very much. I have a few questions from the plan itself, but from your presentation, which is also in the plan, the notion of shared parking spaces and encouraging private parking spaces to be shared with the public, essentially. So what sort of incentives might we offer to the owners of those private lots in the town center, do you think? I mean, do you have any ideas?
Part of it could be through a pricing strategy. If they wanted to make their stalls available for a price, that those revenues could be returned to them or returned to the BRZ for town center enhancement. There's also been a business who's one of the few on the working group that's indicated they would contribute their parking stock to the overall downtown stock and would like to see their revenues go into fare-free transit. I think that there's probably some work to do through that working group in the BRZ to try to broker those discussions with the individual businesses and really encourage them to join into the program with the idea that the more businesses that contribute and the more flexible our parking space is, the better their customers will be served.
Yeah, no, those are some good suggestions, because there are quite a number of privately owned stalls, aren't there? In a similar vein, where did I see that? I guess it was in the cash and lieu part. There was something about, yeah, in the reducing in lieu parking fees. And I think for the most part, the logic is simple to follow. But for the downtown developments that have been and more will be in the future, 3-story with residential. So if there's very low cash and lieu fees associated to not providing parking, then you could end up with residential use in the building, which is quite different from commercial use. So you're going to have homeowners or visitors or whatever without assigned stalls. And that creates some friction and problem for those residents. So would you see sort of a two-pronged approach to that? I mean, reducing the cash and lieu for commercial stalls or stalls that are related to commercial approval versus residential?
Potentially. Yeah, that could be a consideration when we review the policy.
Great. Good. That was an easy answer. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation so far, Mr. Sarte. So some of the recommendations that I see in this in terms of the beginning of the parking management plan, that's what I'm supposed to be asking questions on, right? Okay. One of the recommendations is, and I'm paraphrasing, is helping visitors make their parking choices as they're about to make them, as opposed to while they're cruising around in gridlock. And so I was wondering if one of the recommendations might be, from a more detailed perspective, creating some sort of app on people's phones where we can let them know where there is surplus parking in the community, similar to what they're doing west of here, as well as maybe the digital lights that they have on parking lots that state how many stalls are available. And then as you're coming into town, those seem to be, I don't know what kind of voodoo they do to make that happen, but that might be an interesting capital plan going forward. I don't know what my colleagues think that though. And then I just wanted to comment in the affirmative of the idea of taking more and more of the bicycle stalls off the sidewalk and putting them like on those street pads or in more appropriate areas, because I feel like when we tell people that we don't want them cycling down Main Street, it's a conflicting message when we say that they can park their bike on Main Street. So I think that's a really great idea.
Councillor McCallum, just to clarify, Main Street sidewalks.
Sidewalks, yeah, what did I just say? I'm sorry.
Main Street itself.
Sorry, Main Street sidewalks, I apologize, thank you. And so further in the report, it talks about sort of building the parking developers think they require within a building, and then measuring that and allowing for a sort of a contingency plan of sorts, or they would have to come up with a contingency plan. So if these assigned parking stalls don't work and we think you need more, you'll have to show us. So how is that going to work when developers like certainty?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I think the contingency planning is one of the more interesting ideas in here. I like the idea of aiming for an appropriate amount of parking and not over providing it, because it doesn't serve anyone's need to necessarily to over provide. But what that contingency planning looks like, I think as we get into the parking regulation updates, we'll want to think through a little bit more carefully. If we're opening that door for developers, what exactly does that mean?
Mm-hmm. I think how it's actually quite also interesting is that there's developments in town where they've built to the full parking complement, and in certain cases, and not many, but in those cases, the parkades, you could like shoot a cannon through them because they're not utilized. Seniors housing is a perfect example of that. So at the Lodge, with the new development, they built to the full complement required, and I think 14% of our residents actually drive. 54 of the Lodge, or the independent housing, 54% of them drive. And then within our social housing stock, I think the number was like 70% actually have vehicles. So you've built to this number, and so in some cases it's an opportunity for those building owners or developers to lease those stalls short-term to businesses downtown if they happen to be close to the downtown core, or some other business arrangement. But would that kind of horse trading, I guess, be something that you would expect within your advisory group? Sort of one of the many, many topics that they would be covering?
Two parts to that.
I know my head's here.
The first was around parking requirements and seeing a demand that's less than what was required. Those costs get passed on then to Lodge residents, and the monthly fees that are needed to be paid. I know that there are parking stalls in some of those areas in Spring Creek Mountain Village, for example, that are available to be purchased, and they can't sell them because there isn't a demand for it, because there's an oversupply. So getting that right level of requirement for parking for particular areas based on adjustment factors is a piece of work that would be done as part of the land use bylaw updates, and I think that's really important as a first piece. In terms of brokering, which is the idea that somebody with an available parking stall could make it available to somebody else. At this point in time, there's no incentive for brokering in the town center. Someone could park a car in a lot, which is a very common situation, and leave it there for really as long as they want. And there are a number of residents that are either on the periphery or in the town center that are currently doing that with no incentive to move those vehicles, or no incentive to seek out an alternative parking spot that might be behind their neighbor's place. So by bringing in, and we think it's very important before we see some more residential development, to Mayor Borman's earlier comment, before we start adding more residents, seeing regulation that would prevent people from being able to use the available downtown stock as long-term parking is really key. And then that creates the incentive for people then to go out and seek out a garage that they can rent for $50 a month, or talk to one of the neighboring businesses about perhaps having an employee parking stall available for them during peak season.
Cookies for parking. One last question I had was about complementary businesses. So businesses that say are primarily a daytime business and sharing parking with businesses that are primarily an evening or nighttime business. And when we're asking, or when businesses are asking their staff to park on the periphery, which is common. If you work in a mall, you're not allowed to park near the front. You have to park at the very back. Will we be, either through local improvement levies or through the BRZ or through the tax base, be designing more corridors that are more lit for people so that they can safely get to their vehicles should they be going home late at night? Bar workers, I guess I'm pointing to in particular.
I think that would go hand in hand with thinking through, for looking for people to park here and walk here. How do we encourage that to happen? That's a great point. Lighting for late night and lighting the areas for doing some peripheral parking.
There used to be a time, many, many years ago in Ontario, where you actually had to walk your female staff to their car. It was, I believe, the law. That is not the law now, but I wonder if there could be, through that strategy group, some way to do something like that. I don't know. It's an idea. Anyways, I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you.
Just before I pass the mic to another councillor, I'll note that your first point, or your first question around, improving the information available to travelers at the time they're making the decisions is actually addressed in here. And maybe, were you at the workshop with the parking? Yeah, because there was a lot of talk about it then.
Yeah, I don't think any details were actually.
Well, we talked about the same sort of approach as Banff is using.
I think I brought it up actually at that workshop, and I was just making a point of bringing it up publicly as an opportunity.
But it is in the integrated plan here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Which page is that on?
Well, page 19, there's a brief section, and in the exhibit 14, a brief note around it. So it's not lost in any case. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Asarte. Is it possible to go back to one of your slides that shows the different patterns of parking? Yeah, that one. There's a number of different parking ideas in that map. And one of them is that light blue hatch that says 4-hour seasonal. So there are two other sections there that say 4-hour paid year-round, 4-hour paid seasonal. So if you had a 4-hour seasonal, what is it going to be in the off-season? What are you sharing that seasonality with?
The idea with those is that in the off-season, longer duration could be acceptable if the utilization was low enough in those lots. And just to, this is a initial cut at a recommended set of regulations, but it could be adjusted prior to implementing them and rolling them out. But that was the idea with those 4-hour areas, is perhaps they could be all day in the winter time, so it's convenient for staff walking in cold temps.
So where you have an all-day parking and a 4-hour seasonal, you would assume that throughout the year that would change, but it would still be free parking in those areas. And the ones identified as paid parking would be the locations where there would be seasonal paid parking.
Correct.
And all of the seasonal paid parking, the 4-hour year-round parking is all Main Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
So right on Main Street, that would be year-round paid parking. But as you layer back from Main Street, it would change. There'd be a variety of parking options off of Main Street.
And with Main Street, again, we're trying to encourage higher turnover in those spots, short duration errands. It'd be 30 minutes free year-round. Off-season, the fares could be reduced. Our goal would be during off-season to see that 80%, 85% utilization. And if we're seeing that utilization's below that, the fares would be adjusted or potentially eliminated in the wintertime.
And we would have to manage the fares through kiosks or through phone apps or a combination?
With the plan adopted, and if that's an initiative through strategic planning and the budget process that council's wishing to pursue, we would investigate technologies and different ways to do that. The plan recommends that it's as convenient and easy to use as possible, and there are a number of new technologies, app-based technologies that are very convenient. 2-minute setup, 20-second second use.
So once you register your vehicle, it starts calculating. And how does it know when you're finished? Do you have to log out, or what do you do?
In that particular case, you choose the amount of time you like, and it prompts if you want to extend that time.
Okay. And so the fact that we're assuming that all the paid parking will be on Main Street, is that something that was discussed with the BRZ?
Yes.
And this is a good compromise?
Yes.
So far?
From the BRZ's perspective, they're interested in providing good customer service, and they see now that people are hunting for spots, they're not able to find spots. The idea that if someone is willing to pay, which many of their customers are, they come to a community like ours with an expectation that parking isn't going to be free, that we've given them that choice. There's going to be a spot available, and there's an opportunity for them to pay for that convenience. And then we're also providing them with good information as to where free parking is. So if they are price sensitive and they do want to park for free, or they want to park for longer than 4 hours, that we give clear information indicating where those parking areas are.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Sarte, getting back to parking in lieu of, I like what I see here right now, parking in lieu of, we talked about it quite a bit. It's fairly expensive, and we're looking at possibly reducing that amount because of new strategies and things like that. Could encourage development in the downtown core and remove financial barriers. Just wondering, what does that look like moving forward with this? Is that a discussion that we're going to have, and are we going to get close to decision on that, or is that part of this whole thing?
With all of these strategies, they need to be implemented together. And so the premise that we can reduce cash in lieu fees comes with the idea that we're doing a number of other things that are going to reduce parking demand, and that the funds that are contributed in lieu go towards parking management strategies that are going to be efficient and do a good job of enabling people to come to the town center. So all that to preface that it's not a matter of picking and choosing which initiatives per se that are palatable or attractive for one user group or another. It's really looking at it in terms of managing the overall stock with an integrated plan. If adopted by council, the integrated plan, the next step would be to look at both the land use and the cash in lieu policies, update them, and bring drafts back to council for subsequent decision and approval of those policies.
And in here it talks about the cash in lieu changing to $5,000 or $10,000. Canmore might be a little bit more complex because we might have to purchase other parking for off-site parking, and there's all sorts of things that probably fit into that. So maybe 10,000 isn't the number. Maybe it's a little bit more. Paid parking could be part of that solution. It could go a variety of ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And communities have done a wide range. The plan touches on that. Everything from $0 cash in lieu to $75,000 cash in lieu. Ultimately, it's about do we think we have a management plan that's going to effectively manage the stock we have, and that we're coming up with a number that's appropriate for our local circumstances. So I would agree we can do a bit more analysis on that before we come back, and a bit more, provide a bit more rationale for, and potentially even a range of options for council to consider. Great. To some extent, it's philosophical. Do we want to promote vibrancy and support that redevelopment, If we do, then we pick a number that's favorable.
Well, I think we do, so I'm happy to see it and look forward to that conversation.
Councillor Comfort. Councillor Mara.
Just answered my question also.
Son of a gun. Yeah, we're knocking them down. I had a couple of questions of clarification for in Exhibit 3, potential parking management strategies. Just help me understand some of your intent here. So on the strategy, financial incentives, one of the, or the description is parking cash out or transit benefits as an alternative to parking subsidies. What are you thinking there? What parking cash out, what does that infer?
So presently we often offer employees parking spaces at our business, or as a resident you come into a building and you have an assigned parking stall, and it's all bundled with your employment or it's bundled with your unit purchase. And the idea of cash out is that you do one of two things. You either, those costs are borne by your business or passed on to your customers. So you either directly charge an employee for parking, as is the case in Calgary, or if you're going to provide that benefit for free to an employee, that you would provide a similar benefit to an employee that chooses to use transit. Right now, an employee has the option of parking downtown for free or buying themselves a bus pass to come downtown. So our incentive structure is geared towards driving. Likewise, if you move into a development and the parking's all bundled, there's no incentive to moving in with one less car or getting one less car. You have those spaces assigned, you have no incentive. But if you're paying an extra $50 or $100 per month, the people who choose not to have vehicles can have lower rents. And it creates an appropriate incentive structure that encourages less driving.
I guess that's not quite as easy to see in Canmore because there's not a lot of commercial buildings anyways that provide employee housing in that way as there is in the city that I can think of.
An easy solution, so we offer presently free parking to employees, to residents, to visitors. An example of cash out would be to provide fare-free transit. And now it's giving a similar benefit to travelers to the town center as we're providing to motorists coming to the town center. So I think we may not have all the same solutions as the city, but there are creative ways for businesses to incentivize employees to use transit. Yeah. A number of businesses are giving incentives for people who bicycle to work or walk to work. It just probably takes a bit of creativity to think of how we turn that incentive structure around to encourage the travel that we want to see.
Okay, and the next one down, the unbundled parking, is that also more relevant to residential developments?
Certainly, yeah. So a lot of the new rental development, for example, within close proximity to the town center, we've been encouraging them to unbundle their parking.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. I had another question for you regarding that fare-free transit philosophy. If in the report it suggests that if we provided fare-free transit, the actual annual revenue is only $15,000.
I think that was an assessment for summertime revenue.
Okay, so here it says eliminating fares would reduce annual revenue approximately $15,000. So that would be what you're talking about, just the summer revenue.
Summer period.
I guess one of the considerations would be if you're planning to expand the transit services to the hotel part, that is going to take more infrastructure, and that would actually add revenue if you know, to that revenue recovery program. So if we were going to try and capture the hotel guests through the transit extension services, it would actually cost us more, and there would be more revenue. So if there was a way to incorporate the hotels into that cost offset, that would be beneficial to expand the transit to that and recover some of that revenue from hotels as opposed to the fare box. Because just offsetting it with parking might not be the most cost-efficient way to do that, because there will be cost to expand the services to the hotel part.
Certainly, that would, the future revenue that's foregone would have to be, if service was to expand, would have to be weighed against the benefit of increased ridership. So what we want to be careful of is not to collect a very small amount of revenue on either today's present service or any future service and forego a very large percentage of ridership because of it. So if we can see a big benefit, and perhaps it's something to test out what that benefit could be, then that's a really great way to invest. We're already investing 90% of the way there through the fees we pay for transit service. If we can get 20 to 60% more ridership by increasing that 10%, that contribution, that could be a really effective investment either today or in the future. With the hotel transit potential, right now our present system as it's set up can't efficiently capture those destinations. And so there's been some suggestion, either in the planner and discussions with the working group, of some potential shuttle, seasonal shuttle or trolley system or something unique like that. And if that was the case, that would be something that maybe we partner with the Hotel Association to get up and running. And there would be an alternative to collecting fares from visitors. Again, trying to capture maximum ridership by making it as convenient and attractive of an option as possible.
And I mean, the hotels could give out a one-way travel pass as well, or something that the hotels actually support, because there will be cost to adding those services to the hotel.
That'd be a great way to do it. To have the hotels purchase the passes and give them to.
Sure, and then it doesn't have to be a two-way. I mean, it's a contribution to that whole transit system, and that would be beneficial for everybody, I think. So, thanks.
Councillor Mira.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the other end, when we're talking about the parking and paying, who's going to enforce when somebody runs out of time and they just leave their vehicle for another 4 hours thinking, keep my fingers crossed I don't get caught, which I think goes on now. Are we looking at adding resources in bylaw, or who does the enforcement?
Bylaw is responsible for enforcement at present, and when we look at options for price parking, we would consider some of them. The options come with the ability to enforce on our behalf, and those options would be considered as part of the business case for which direction to go, which technology to select.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. With back to Exhibit 3, we say encourage alternate modes, so encourage walking, bicycling, ride sharing. So currently I don't think we have any considered ride sharing. Like we have taxi service stuff, but I don't think there's Uber operating here unless someone is. So with that, would we be looking to do something like we do with the taxi service, where they'd have to do training and stuff to be a ride sharing, or are we just going to say welcome Uber and other ride sharing things?
I think that's a big can of worms, whole conversation. I haven't had many discussions around it. I think this is more just a strategy. If you can get people sharing a vehicle, it means that the vehicle is utilized more. It means you require less vehicles and less parking spaces. So that could be Car2Go or Zipcar, where they're just in assigned spots around town. We are seeing Uber be disruptive in places and take down the amount of parking that's happening at airports, for example. And that's something that I think we need to continue to monitor through bylaw, who manages our taxi service, as a disruptive technology that comes with some challenges and also comes with some benefits. And I don't know if Ms. Cottle would like to add any more, or you've had any discussions? So it's, at this point, it's just encouraging car share is part of the solution.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions from members of council, we can move on to the second part of the presentation.
Good afternoon, Council.
He's going to throw you to the wolves here.
Yep, jump right in.
Okay.
Thanks. So the 2014 ITP laid the groundwork for principles in community planning and roadway design that would enable greater choice and opportunity for residents and visitors to move around and connect in our community. These principles have informed a number of important projects over the past several years, including new pedestrian bridges in Spring Creek and Cougar Creek, improved connectivity to Bow Valley Trail, the Benchlands Roundabout, and pathway improvements in Canmore's first complete street rehab on Spring Creek Drive. These projects represent long-term investments in managing travel demand. The return on these investments will grow each year as a greater proportion of the community is enabled to choose travel options that don't require an automobile. At present, Main Street and other corridors in Canmore's town centre experience high levels of congestion during a number of peak season days. Even during a typical summer day, moderate levels of congestion are experienced. With the expected growth in Canmore's population and visitation, and without continuing to change the function of our roads and the way that people travel, we can continue to expect much worse levels of congestion in the future. The 2014 ITP is a long-range strategic document that guides transportation decisions and influences land use. It was developed based on significant engagement and was developed with reference to relevant planning and strategy documents, including the Municipal Development Plan. While the plan sets out an overarching vision for a more sustainable multimodal transportation system, updates are required to define functional requirements on major corridors such as Bow Valley Trail and Railway Avenue, and in turn to inform the engagement and design for planned improvements. So what's new with the 2018 updates to the ITP? The 2014 ITP set a mode share target of 30% walking, cycling, and transit trips by 2020. Currently, however, the majority of daily trips in Canmore are taken by automobile. So the figure on the left is measured in 2017, the existing mode share in Canmore. With expected growth in Canmore's population and visitation, the anticipated modal split in 2030, if no changes are made to the current network, is shown in the upper right corner. So you can see that there's an increase in car trips to 84%. With successful implementation of the ITP with 2018 updates, a significant shift is anticipated from car to walking, cycling, and transit use. The ITP includes recommendations for the use of best practices in street design that will enable a shift to 40% non-vehicular travel at peak times, so a typical summer day, long weekend in the town centre. It's important to note that a full third of residents are still expected to continue to drive for all trips during the summer season. In order to achieve this target, a number of network changes will be required in order to promote the uptake of transit and active transportation options. How streets are classified and designed is fundamental to enabling choice. Traditionally, the existing use of a roadway has been considered to be its designated or desired use, and this in turn has dictated the form and function of the roadway and surrounding environment. This creates a transportation system that is not overly focused on traffic safety or livability. A shift in this paradigm is to consider how the desired function and form of the street influence behavior. This approach places more emphasis on livability and safety. Building on the Complete Streets philosophies introduced in the 2014 Integrated Transportation Plan, the updated document places emphasis on reducing speeds and creating streets that are recognizable in their function. Streets have both traffic carrying or link functions, as well as living, working, and playing or place functions. Recognizing that streets comprise a significant amount of public space, it's important to consider both of these functions as part of the planning and design process. 2018 updates to the Integrated Transportation Plan feature an updated street classification to simplify the number of roadway designs and to allow for a more intuitive understanding of roadway hierarchy. These will inform design requirements and allow for a more consistent look and feel of roadways. For arterial roadways, this will mean a speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour, separate and protected cycling infrastructure, Parking where it exists would be restricted to parking bays, and pedestrian refuges would be provided at crossing points. For collector roadways, this will mean a speed limit of 30 kilometers an hour with separate and protected cycling infrastructure, parking either on street or restricted to parking bays, and reduced pedestrian crossing distances. For local roadways, the updated street classifications will mean a speed limit of 30 kilometers an hour with shared travel lanes between cars and cyclists, parking either in parking bays or on street, and marked crosswalks for pedestrians. The 2018 updates provide an increased focus on moving traffic and goods around the town centre and moving people into the town centre to allow for a greater activation of Main Street. This will require modifications to the roadway network around the town centre to accommodate vehicular flow on collector and arterial roadways. This may involve changes including the free flow of movements north-south along 8th Avenue and traffic calming along the 2 west blocks of Main Street. So how do we achieve some of the targets that have been identified within the updated plan? The ITP's implementation recommendations identify short and long-term projects and strategies to realize the overall vision. One of the first pieces will involve the rapid implementation of a core network of separated and protected cycling facilities on collector and arterial roadways. Having a completed network of cycling infrastructure that's inviting to people of all ages and abilities has been shown to be more effective at increasing cycling trips than the piecemeal implementation of infrastructure over extended periods of time. An important aspect of creating infrastructure that's inviting to those who may be on the fence or interested in riding more but concerned about riding on less comfortable facilities is the assurance that they can get from start to finish of their trip without gaps in the network where they may be forced to ride in mixed traffic or higher stress environments. To increase the proportion of trips made in Canmore by bicycle, this will be a key piece to enabling a wider range of the population to cycle. Achieving a 5% mode share for transit will require a number of supporting strategies, which will be developed in concert with Rome Transit. Rome envisions improved connectivity and amenities at bus stops, better accessibility, and increased service, contributing to increases in mode share. Another key element that's been found to grow ridership in many communities is the establishment of fare-free transit. Fare-free transit would support goals of affordability, allow potential riders to try out transit for free, and when combined with other supporting infrastructure and programs, can make transit an attractive option for longer trips, inclement weather, and meet a wide variety of mobility needs. We can expect a 20 to 60% increase in ridership based on studies of other resort communities and based on our own statistics from the fare-free period. The ITP envisions a transportation system that will provide mobility and access for all. Most trips, regardless of which modes they involve, will begin and end as pedestrian trips. Creating infrastructure that's inclusive allows people of all ages and abilities to participate in public life. The ITP recommends continuing to fund accessibility improvements each year and continuing to connect missing pieces of infrastructure. Complete Streets roadway rehabilitation will be focused on key corridors throughout town. Enabling a greater uptake of transit, walking, and cycling will involve many pieces in addition to hard infrastructure. Embracing Canmore's northern climate means accounting for travel needs through all seasons. Ensuring that travel options are accessible year-round will require regular winter maintenance and lighting standards that allow people to feel comfortable and safe during the shorter daylight hours of the winter months. As Canmore's streets move towards function based on the form of the roadway and adjacent land uses, speeds will start to reflect the updated roadway classifications. However, with existing residential roadways that reflect more traditional design philosophies, traffic calming provides an option to address issues where high traffic speeds and through traffic affect the safety and livability of residential neighborhoods. Studies have shown that 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limits create a much more forgiving environment in terms of pedestrian safety than traditionally posted 50-kilometer-an-hour roadways. The updates to the 2018 ITP include a recommendation for a reduction in residential speed limits to 30 kilometers an hour. This will help to create a more livable and inviting environment where residents can interact with their neighborhood and community. The town has an established framework for engaging on specific projects and initiatives. Following the adoption of the ITP's 2018 updates for planning purposes, Engagement will take place for individual projects that have cost or community impacts, and council approvals will be required. On projects such as the Railway Avenue Concept Plan, council approval would be required for the development of the concept plan and the approval of the capital budget. To develop the concept design, engagement will be done with the community and impacted stakeholders. Work will be ongoing in these areas and will be tailored to the scope and scale of each project. The vision in the ITP is supported by the town's core values. In order to achieve the targets that have been set in this plan, the town will need to work hard to create an environment that supports increased choice for how residents and visitors choose to get around. As options are evaluated for implementation, decision makers should consider the social, economic, and environmental priorities, impacts and benefits rather, of each project. Priority should be given to improvements that encourage modal shift and are in alignment with the strategies, projects, and priorities outlined in the ITP. Educational and promotional programming will be important for providing information to residents and visitors about new infrastructure and transportation options. This shift to more transit, walking, and biking will result in better functioning of the roadway network, as opposed to increased congestion and parking concerns. And through this shift, we can create a public realm that increases social interaction, vibrancy, and our sense of community. For next steps, in terms of both the parking plan and the integrated transportation plan, do we want to break for questions or continue?
Are there any
Sure.
questions right now? No, you're on a roll.
All right. So next steps for the parking plan, we'll be back at council next week, June 19th. From there, looking at developing budget and informing strategic plans, working through the council budgeting process and approvals for policy changes. There will be further engagement done as well as different pieces are implemented. For the integrated transportation plan, we're looking to bring that back to council on July 3rd. We'll be kicking off engagement fairly soon for Railway Avenue and Bow Valley Trail to develop concept designs. There'll also be budget piece and strategic plans to follow, policy improvements, and more engagement as implementation moves forward. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Very good presentation.
Thank you.
Of course, you're training from the best, so training with the best. I have a few questions. There's a discrepancy in a couple of the charts between the imagined speed limit on Main Street. One chart suggests 15, and the other chart suggests 20. But
I'm sorry, I didn't hear where.
So in Figure E2, the Activity Street, which I think Main Street is imagined to be, it notes a speed limit of 15. And on the chart on the next page, the speed limit for an Activity Street shows at 20. So not much difference, but just curious where that's going.
Okay, thank you for catching that. I think 20 is the correct.
Good. 15 would be painful. Slow it down. I'm not arguing that, but 15. On a more significant matter or in question, the section 6.3 around potential traffic calming measures, just how would you see them sort of rolling out, or how would traffic calming measures be introduced into various neighborhoods?
So there's a bit of a process in Figure 6.1 outlining a process for when there's a request for traffic calming. There would be an initial screening phase, so looking at data, reviewing past concerns, gathering extra data if needed, an evaluation and prioritization phase, implementing perhaps temporary measures, and then doing follow-up. And if it were found to need a permanent measure, there would then be an implementation phase.
And there's a number of really interesting, varied approaches to traffic calming shown on the following pages. So presumably it would be through the, I guess, evaluation phase that the best approach to the traffic calming would be identified?
Yes, depending on the particular issue.
So then, if you get traffic calming requests, my expectation would be that engineering would be inundated with traffic calming requests immediately. This is approved because every residential neighborhood is looking for traffic calming. So how are you going to manage that if it should play out that way? How are you going to prioritize by neighborhood or by street?
Yeah, that is something we'll need to consider. It is currently part of the 2014 ITP, so we do receive requests for traffic calming in different areas and do go out and do some analysis and implement, in some case, interim measures. As that volume increases, we will need a way of determining the most appropriate way to prioritize locations if we're only getting through a certain number each year.
Okay, great. I mean, there's likely to be a lot. But I noticed in the report there's a suggestion of creating a new working group similar to the TRIG that would meet to analyze or assess some of these things. Is that the expectation?
That could help, I think. Is that the... We
Or am I
do
thinking
still
of the
meet
parking?
with...
There was something in the parking, okay, right.
Yeah, we do meet with that committee on a monthly basis and discuss the best means of addressing concerns.
Councillor Comfort.
Yes, thanks very much for your presentation. That was excellent. I have a question. This may be sort of aspirational, perhaps. Driving around on Sunday, I had a scary moment at 10th and 6th, I guess it would be, before we stopped there. Two people, I saw them coming. I was stopped at the stop sign. I saw them coming across. I went, they're not even going to pause at the stop sign. They're just going to blow through. They're pedaling. They were talking to each other side by side, and they blew through. And I thought, gee, if I'm not paying attention, they're toast. Like, you know, and so it really scared me. And so I'm wondering about the sort of educational part of this, and that we, as Canmore, we might aspire to be a safe bicycle community, or like that. And I think they were just enjoying the day. It was a beautiful day, sunny, enjoying each other, and blew through. And when they looked at me, they went, oh, gee, you know. And so I'm worried about that.
Yeah, and education will be an important piece as we encourage more people to start cycling or walking or taking transit. I think as well with the recommendations around updated street classifications and having designs that are a little more intuitive in terms of how things are supposed to be functioned should help to create either slower speeds through the streets in a more forgiving environment, or dedicated facilities where people who are currently on the fence can perhaps feel encouraged to try out a different mode.
I don't know. And so would signage be a part of that? I mean, there was something recently on the back of a bus, and it said, I'm trying to remember what it said exactly, but it was something about, if you want to cycle side by side and talk with each other, great. If you want to talk with your maker, that's what you should do. Like, it was sort of like not very nice, you know, like, but maybe sometimes we have to be less nice to sort of really make the point, because I know I'm talking about this too much, but it's very worrying, because, you know, if you're in a 2,000-pound car or whatever they are now, 4,000 pounds or whatever, there's no chance. It's like a motorcycle versus the car, right? You know, on a highway, like, it's terrifying to me. So anyway.
Mr. Fark, I think, has something to say.
Yes,
Comfort
thank you.
me,
I'm
Mr.
jumping
Fark.
up and down over here. Would like to respond to that somewhat. So in addition to the comments by Ms. Alec, it's important to note that there are traffic safety laws that are established, and they apply equally to cyclists as to vehicles. So the two cyclists that you would have noted are no different than if a car had blown through the stop sign, and they would be treated as such from an enforcement perspective, right? So being a cycling community or promoting mode shift, it's an important component of our traffic management, but that does not mean that we would not look to enforce the traffic safety rules, right? So I just think it's important to understand that behavior is no more acceptable on a bicycle than it is in a vehicle, and we would need to treat it as such.
Phew. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. You covered a lot of good points. One of the things that you mentioned, and it's mentioned in this report a number of times, is the intuitive nature of some of the changes. And I'm having difficulty with some of the changes because I don't think some of them are intuitive. I think some of them are confusing. I'll give you an example. The red sidewalks over by Spring Creek, I think, are confusing to people. They're not intuitive because people don't understand what the red sidewalk implies. And people wander all over those sidewalks. And the green pathway, the green markings on roadways are not intuitive because people don't know what they mean. One of the things that we're seeing along Bow Valley or Railway Avenue by the crosswalks, it suggests that planters and trees and street furniture are not just decorations. There are trees beside crosswalks where you cannot see the people behind them. And so some of these things sound really good on paper. I mean, they sound like they should be a very good process, but the practical application of them, and I think we're seeing some of this roll out because we are trying some of the complete streets process in our community. I think some of them are not very practical. And I'd really like to sort of tease this report out a little more thoroughly, because what's stated in the report is starting to be incorporated into the community, but it's not as intuitive as we're making it sound.
I agree. One of the recommendations in the implementation section of the report is the importance of the educational and promotional component. Lots of these features are new in Canmore and also in a lot of other communities in terms of drivers or pedestrians or cyclists not having interacted with it personally before. So it is something at some of those locations that we're looking at adding some pavement markings to clarify what the different uses are. And I think as we start rolling out more of this, we will have to figure out messaging to let people know what the intended uses are as well.
And, you know, we have a big turnover of people in the community too. So trying to educate a group of people that will carry that education forward and you know, assume that education for a longer period of time is very difficult because of the transient nature of our communities.
I guess another piece, Sandy's just reminding me that Town of Canmore is involved with, along with 5 other jurisdictions, including the province, is the development of an Alberta Bicycle Design Guide. So it's a review and recommendation of best practices in cycling design that's making provincial recommendations. It'll also be informing an update to the Traffic Safety Act that will facilitate the application of best practices in cycling design in an Alberta context. Currently, there are some things that it's harder to implement given the current regulations that are out there, but that does identify recommendations for how these pieces will be rolled out, but that doesn't take away from there being a need to educate on what things mean.
One of the other recommendations in the report is to narrow the streets to make it less comfortable to drive. A lot of our community members do drive, and I sort of have to question the motivation because, you know, some people have a lot of leisure time and they're spending their time leisurely in the community. They're retired, they have time to get around, they have time to do things. But then other people are driving their kid to hockey with a hockey bag. So there's no alternative for that sort of travel. Or if you're dropping your kid off at daycare, there's no alternative for you to drive a car. So I think it's really important that we also recognize that we have to make the roads comfortable and safe for drivers as well.
Definitely, and it's expected that a number of residents are still going to be using the car for all trips. It can be a practical way of getting around depending on the trip purpose. And in terms of the roadway widths, and the intent with that is that currently with the way a lot of roadways are designed, they're designed for a higher speed of travel than what the posted speed limit is, and that sort of sends conflicting messages to people using the corridor because you can drive faster. It feels comfortable to drive faster there. So some of the reduced lane widths are just bringing the driver's experience of the roadway to an appropriate speed, or to help them expect to travel the appropriate posted speed.
Just to add to that response, from the roadways that we're monitoring, we're seeing that the majority of people are speeding. So it's not a question of slowing people down so that they can't get to daycare or can't get to hockey. It's getting them driving an appropriate speed for the particular road. And when we do that, things will flow. People will still get to their destinations. They'll still be able to efficiently get around. What we're trying to eliminate is the 113 kilometers per hour we measured on Benchlands Trail as part of our pilot. We're trying to create environments where people respond to the road design and are driving in a way that's safe and comfortable for the other people who are sharing the road with them. I know the pilot on Benchlands is generating a lot of buzz, let's say, in the community. And it's because it's a pilot. It's a change, first of all, and so it's something different, but it's also using temporary bollards that are, not attractive. And but when you go up and down there, the speeds are reduced. People are still able to drive 40, 45 kilometers an hour, 50 kilometers an hour comfortably. I was in a big bus full of conference attendees last week going down Benchlands Trail at a perfect 45 kilometer an hour speed. So that's really what we're targeting. Let's get people, it says 50 kilometers maximum. Let's get people driving with that as the maximum. It's going to feel more comfortable for everybody else on the street. You're going to be able to get in and out of traffic. It's going to reduce the noise levels in our community. We're going to be able to send our kids around with a high degree of certainty that they're going to be able to get around safely and comfortably. And ultimately, people are going to get around. The traffic's going to flow. We're not talking about a difference of minutes. We're talking about a difference of seconds in a trip. Our trips are about 7 minutes on average in Canmore. It's a small difference, and if we can reduce congestion, that's going to more than make up for reduced traffic speeds.
Yeah. Thinking about what you raised there, Councillor Sanford, and certainly I understand the conversation, and so intuitive, is that the right word, or experiential? But when I'm driving now on Bow Valley Trail, where it narrows there and the lane widths are more narrow and the curb's been built in and there's the trees and all, without even realizing it, I'm driving slower. So it is intuitive. When you get into a roadway that's designed for slower speeds like that, you intuitively drive slower. Same coming down from the Rose and Crown corner. The road takes a little bend, there's bushes, there's crosswalks, so, people just have to drive slower to navigate through there. But I don't think any of this work that we've started on complete street designs or a new vision of transit initiatives in Canmore are going to be, I think we've recognized it's a generational change. So, the red cycling lanes, why would red signify cycling? Who knows? But in a few years, maybe it will, because we stick to it.
You have to be here for a few years to learn that, though.
Yeah, but if it's happening everywhere else at the same time, which maybe it isn't, but I understand that this is more common exploration, at least in other centers. Some of the big cities are creating cycling lanes, and they're color coding them and all that. So,
Mayor Borman, if I could comment, just so Ms. Halleck doesn't have to take responsibility for some of the things that we've been trying. Some of this is just, we're learning. We're implementing things, we're trying things out, and we're learning. The trees on Bow Valley Trail, the trees on Spring Creek Drive, we're reviewing those. We'll probably make some adjustments to that. Some of the issue is that it's we're trying to do things within the budgets that we have, and you have to start somewhere. So it's not a complete thing yet. There's only bits and pieces of certain aspects. One side of Bow Valley Trail, it's very clear and comfortable. The other side, we have this chunk of concrete. Okay, is that the right approach? Did it quite meet the needs? We're going to make some changes there too. With the Alberta Bicycle Design Guidelines and with what we're learning, we're going to be able to start rolling things out more consistently. We're going to learn from what we're doing, and it'll be more intuitive as more of it gets built out.
What I believe we are being asked to do is to amend the integrated transportation plan. And you have very specific ideas in the integrated transportation plan. One of them is to turn all the residential streets into 30-kilometer zones. That's a really big change from what we have now. So I don't see that as an easy amendment. And I think if we're going to amend this transportation plan to that degree, we need to go back to our community and talk about it. We need to have public engagement on changing the integrated transportation plan to include some of the recommendations that you're making here, because some of them are pretty major. And you know, if you think people are speeding now in a 50 zone, if you turn it to 30, guess what people are going to be doing? I mean, if they're speeding at 50, they're not going to be not speeding at 30. And there are times of the day when there's zero traffic on the roads and you want people to go 30 on those roads because that's the posted speed. I think we're just on a collision course with a big challenge if we try to pass this without having more community engagement.
The plan as it's presented is the path forward required for us to be able to get the mode share we require, to get the people walking and cycling, to make our streets comfortable, to make them safe. How we implement that, I think there's still a lot of discussion that can be had. So for example, with the 30 kilometers an hour in residential neighborhoods, approval of the plan doesn't change the speed limits overnight. What it says is that we want our communities to be safe, we want them to be comfortable, we want them to be appropriately speeded. 50 kilometers is totally inappropriate for a residential street. You don't see people using the streets in residential neighborhoods if cars are driving 50 kilometers an hour down. That is just too fast. And if you look at the amount of distance that you have to go on a residential street to get from your home to a collector, it's very short. So all we're suggesting is that the appropriate way to get from your house to a collector street is to spend 30 seconds instead of 25 seconds. And then for the other 12 hours that you're in your neighborhood and in your community, you get to enjoy some peace of mind. You get to enjoy the quiet and the comfort knowing that people are driving around at an appropriate speed. In terms of how we implement, it doesn't necessarily mean we go out with a photo radar gun and then we're giving out tickets. What it could be is we implement the policy as Cochrane, for example, has had in place since the 1980s, 30 kilometers an hour unless otherwise posted, with all of their residential areas as 30K zones. And we work on a complaint basis. So if people feel that their streets are being driven inappropriately fast, which we receive quite regular correspondence from people that they do, and we have to tell them, well, it's a 50 kilometer an hour road. That person driving 55 kilometers in front of your house where your kids are trying to play street hockey, that's legal and generally accepted. And we can go out and measure speeds all day, but we'll show them a distribution that says 85% of people are driving that speed, and it's only the outliers doing 70 and 80. That's just unacceptable, and other communities have recognized that, not just abroad, but in our own backyard, Cochrane. So maybe what it is it's complaint driven, and we go out and we change the nature of the street if we see an area where people are driving too fast. But we have to ask ourselves where our priority lies. Is it in saving 5 seconds in traveling from our house to a collector, or is it in having actual safe streets?
In any case, I know we can talk a lot more about this, and there will be more opportunity. This will be coming back July 3rd for approval, but only approval for planning purposes, so not automatically not automatic implementation of everything in the plan. But I think we need to move along a bit off that specific conversation. Councillor Mira.
That's okay, we can move on. Mine was along the line also of the 30-kilometer. I know our partner, or not partners, our I lost my train of thought. Banff has got 30 kilometers on the main street. Have you got any feedback on that from them? I don't know how long it's been in place. We were just in Banff on the weekend. On Main Street? On Banff Avenue, yeah. And does it go into the residential areas also? Do you know that?
I'm not sure if it's in the residential areas.
I think it does.
Not residential.
Oh, Cheryl? No? Okay.
Okay, are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you both for your presentation. And there'll be more discussion on this plan in the future. Moving on then to item E1, which is the Councillor Updates. Any questions from any member council for any other member council? Councillor Comfort?
Sorry, I was going to verbally present. So I will
ahead.
spare you. I can email you a report which is written out, but there was one thing that I wanted to note, which was the passage on June 5th in the legislature of the property assessment. Give me just a second here. It's called, the acronym is PACE, P-A-C-E, and it is the property assessment something something.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Sorry. And anyway, it's really important because it will mean that people that are planning to install sustainable resource like solar panels and so forth, there will be a list of things that here it is, that it covers, and it's a voluntary program. We'd have to pass a bylaw. They're working out the details. I was going to have a meeting with Ms. Bangkai Pima, but due to the unfortunate death of Ms. Staples, we had to cancel the meeting. But that will be coming forward, so that's very exciting. And
yeah, there was some discussion about that sometime recently. I can't remember with who. Administration, somebody over there.
We were having it with the MLA.
Oh, right.
Oh,
right.
okay.
We're talking about it with the MLA, right?
Oh,
over
nice.
chicken wings. Bingo.
Anyway,
which he paid for.
So I'm working with Ms. Riesling Wynn to figure out, to bring forward a proposal to council, because we've been asked to support it and help move it forward for the municipalities. So.
Great. Do you have any questions in for any member of council? Councillor McCallum?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to point out that those of you that didn't attend the seniors' garden party missed a hell of a party.
I bet. Yeah, I was disappointed. I'm sure it was fun. Okay, we'll move on to item F1 then, the service area reports. Any questions under the first section A, CAO's office? Section B, municipal services. I have a question in regards to the community grants competition, which we talked about at agenda review, and it's a matter of interpretation. So in the policy, the grant policy, it's section 4.5 it states that for grant applications, equipment may not be considered eligible. So I was asking about the grant approval for 20 players, which is for equipment. But I mean, I recognize that may not could be the emphasis could be on may. I mean, may not be. But in my mind, it was the emphasis was on the not. So I thought the intent was the not have equipment eligible for these grants.
Yeah, I did follow up with Lisa Brown from Community Social Development on that. And the way that that section of the policy reads is actually a little bit confusing. It's not so much the may not. It's more about the question around it talks about operating equipment for operating purposes. So it's just a section of the policy that is easy to confuse. It doesn't say as neatly as you just said it may not get equipment. It talks about equipment for operating purposes. And because this equipment is enhanced equipment and will be on lend to other theater groups, it's my understanding, and Councillor Hillstead maybe can speak to this because he was at the committee, I am not, that the committee felt like it met the intent of the policy because it was not operating equipment, it was equipment above and beyond operating. So I did, what's that? Sure. Mr. Farkas suggesting I give an example of operating equipment, which might be like a computer or something that you need to actually do the work, whereas this is enhanced equipment, so special lighting. They could still put on their theater production if they don't have this equipment. It just is enhanced. So I did talk with Ms. Brown about it, and she plans to work with that committee. We did talk about bringing the policy back for an update. At this point, it feels largely like it's language cleanup, so we will do that in the course of this term of council, but she'll work with the committee to try to address that issue in next iterations of the grant.
Great, thanks very much. Moving on to section C, unless there's any other questions, section B, municipal, Councillor McCallum.
I just had a question about the engineering services. It just sparked a question with regards to the parking strategy implementations and changing some of the signage or adding signage in Elevation Place. We have some interesting signage that I thought was fantastic when we built Elevation Place, that sort of reserved parking for disabled people or people with mobility challenges, reserved parking for people that were like dropping a book off and coming back out to their car, so 10-minute parking, reserved parking for parents with small children, reserved parking for carpooling, and I see none of those things actually happening in practice. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of enforcement or if we're just going to sign that parking for what it's actually doing.
Councillor or Mr. Fark.
So the intent is actually to recognize the world as it is, not necessarily as we would like it to be. So exactly as you described, there will still be a loading zone and handicap parking, obviously, which are also regulatory requirements. So those will still exist for people who just want to drop a book or people who have mobility challenges. However, the rest of the parking, we will eliminate the carpool parking and the those types of designations because it's not practical to try to enforce that, right? And we shouldn't sign some.
Yeah. And they do enforce it. They just can't be there all the time.
Right. And so we will move to a more
realistic.
Yes.
And then in terms of staff, are staff encouraged to park as far away from the door as they can?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Oh.
Okay, because I know in the beginning they
Facility staff are encouraged to park as away from the building as they can, but rec staff can park wherever they like.
No, it's more
I can
fun
do that
this
too.
way.
Thank you. So staff are encouraged to park far away depending on when they work. Yeah. So we have people who open and close the buildings in winter months who sometimes are the only person there, and they, for safety reasons, actually are encouraged to park in well-lit areas. So it depends on when, and we're actually encouraging them not to park there at all, but to walk or cycle or take the bus to work.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
On the report under land use bylaw updates, I was interested to know one of the 5 most popular topics in the pop-up was food trucks. And I'm curious if the interest was around allowing food trucks. Is that what the interest was?
So we've seen some of both, people who are interested in having them, and we have heard from people who do not want to have them. So it is just an issue of interest, a general discussion topic.
I'm just surprised it was one of the top 5 things people raised in this.
Maybe people were hungry at the time they were providing their input.
Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just getting back to the parking around Elevation Place, there's a suggestion about the parking strategy implementation, 4-hour parking at Elevation Place. And so does that mean you're going to repurpose some of those previously signed stalls to 4-hour parking and change that?
So yes, so the carpool signs will be eliminated, and there will be areas that are slated for 4-hour parking, and there will be some areas that will be all-day parking, mostly in the Panhandle.
Okay. Now, and there's a suggestion that you're going to eliminate overnight parking in the Panhandle?
That is the intent, yes.
Isn't that kind of being used right now for people who are homeless? Parking, well, they're parking their vehicles there and sleeping in them, essentially.
Yes, it is currently being used as an informal parking area. I guess it's a good question. If we don't actually want to displace them, then perhaps we would not do that.
Well,
I think the intent was more, and when they were thinking about it, it was more people parking there to go to meet friends and then to go hiking for a weekend or that sort of thing, and then leaving their vehicle there for multiple days. That is behavior that we do want to discourage in that location. So I guess it, you know.
So that has been happening? Is that something that?
It does happen, yes. And that is a common location, a common spot for people to convene and then move on. And so there is, you know, difficult to find a policy that is discerning enough to know the difference between the two.
Yeah, because pushing people back from that parking lot into neighborhoods could be a problem.
It could be something as simple, and I looked to Ms. Cottle for this as a discussion with bylaw, because it is bylaw who would do the enforcement of that essentially. So it could be that for vehicles that are not attended, we may take a different approach in terms of enforcement than from vehicles that are attended, and that could potentially solve the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember we had quite a discussion about that when we were doing the streets and roads bylaw renewal a couple of years ago.
Yeah, because it was identified that we needed someplace for those people to go, I thought.
So I have a, oh, how much people just.
I just wanted to highlight further to this topic, in Lisa Brown's report under municipal services, she talks about the Homeless to Housing Coalition, where they're currently working with bylaw and they're doing a homelessness survey. And I understood in one of the meetings I had recently that specifically they are going out in the evening paired up with bylaw and actually counting how many people are living out of their vehicles and providing supports and services to them. So I think through Lisa Brown and Community Social Development, we might get a larger understanding of exactly the numbers of people that are doing that.
Just a suggestion I have under sustainability report or from sustainability coordinator, number 6. So they're working on a door hanger aimed to educate residents about spurdy and fruit trees on private property. Maybe we could also put some information there about fire smarting residential properties, removing vegetation close to the home and all that kind of stuff. Mr. Fark?
So there's a larger conversation that needs to be had around fire smarting and especially as it relates to architectural guidelines and essentially landscaping. We start to run the problem between fire smart and wild smart that there's almost nothing that you can plant anymore. Yes, so there is, it's a fair point. It's something that we can look into, but there's a bigger conversation that we need to have and some more investigation we need to do on that issue.
I'm not even thinking that grand or greater scale. It's like, don't put mulch beside your wooden house. You know, there's really simple things in the fire smart plan. Juniper bushes.
Yeah.
If you're going to plant a bush right against your house, plant something different than juniper. Those are, yeah.
Yes.
Get rid of your wood pile that's leaning up against your wood siding.
Right. So that is stuff that we can look into, and we'll be looking for an update with the engineering design guidelines.
Great, thanks. question under operational updates for facilities. Talking about the mold that was observed in lockers in the EP. So there's a note that once the tender is closed, administration will present the options to council in the summer for budget approval, but kind of missed the deadline for, unless September is still summer. Huh? We got one council meeting in August, I'm just saying.
No, they build budgets through the summer, maybe that's what.
Well, I know, but if he wants to get it to a council meeting, the third Tuesday of August is the only council meeting in summer. I'm just noting. Okay, anything else from Councillor Stanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question for the municipal clerk regarding the availability of minutes. And I understand that they will be available by request. What sort of capacity do you have to fill requests? If people want one set of minutes or if they want 5 years worth of minutes, like I don't know what kind of minutes people like to look at.
There's a couple of things. Sometimes people ask for a certain year's worth of minutes. They're really small documents, so it's easy to email a couple or provide a memory stick. But often what people want is a topic searched as well. So as long as there's a relatively unique keyword, it's fairly easy to search them as well.
Oh, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So say I want information on fire. You can search fire?
Fire, you'd get a lot of hits.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd probably want to...
be more specific.
Yeah, people more ask about things like, when was the last fire management plan approved? Can I see the motion? When people are looking for minutes, it's usually pretty specific to a decision or, when a public hearing was held, things like that.
Okay.
In my experience so far. Or sometimes people just want a year's worth of minutes so they can look through them.
And you can do that fairly easily?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the way it's organized now?
You can do that now online.
Yeah, they're
but
online
going
from
back-
2012 till
before,
now, so 6 years worth online. What we didn't have before was most of them available digitally. So now they've all been digitized.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And council can search them through our...
Not yet.
Oh.
That's coming.
But soon.
Yeah, so that's part of our EDRMS project. The municipal clerk department will be the first up. And council should see a significant difference in what you're able to access as far as old, previous to 2012 information.
Oh, great, and it's
Yeah.
searchable.
Yeah, but
Keywords.
so far for the website, there's not a capacity on the website right now to load that many documents.
Right.
Yeah, or really the demand.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad to hear you've thought it through.
Okay, if there's no further questions from that agenda item, we'll move on to the council resolution action list. Are there any questions there? Seeing none, the Bow Valley Regional Housing Monthly Bulletin. Seeing none, I think that takes us to adjournment. I'll move, committee will be adjourned. We're adjourned.